Yu Jihan was a young man who had no powers. Well, except for a skill called sampling, which activated at totally random moments like bad Wi-Fi. Never when you need it, always when it doesn't matter. His job was to be the support for the Karyos Guild. Still, the young man always gave his all, even ready to sacrifice himself for his allies. I mean, someone has to be the disposable hero of the team, right? One day, Kim Hyun-tae, the group leader, announced that he was expelled for being too useless. Basically, thanks for participating, but we already have enough dead weight. With nothing to do, Yu simply accepted. It was almost like being rejected by a tabletop RPG group. It hurts, but you kind of expected it. But it was from there that the relentless search for a new guild began, like Tinder. Except instead of matching with people, he was trying to match with folks wielding swords and magic. Thanks to his somewhat buggy ability, he ended up reaching the Epic Guild, led by an elf. And, knowing the group would grow, he decided to apply. He literally saw a guild startup before it became a unicorn and thought, investing early is always better. What he didn't know was that in the middle of the meeting, Sylph, the spirit of the wind, would choose him as the new contractor. From there, Jihan finally starts to feel like a hero. But of course, with great powers also come great enemies, and sometimes bills, but that's a topic the script hasn't wanted to address yet. We see a war scene, where a warrior advances with his flaming sword. Apparently, no one told him that normal swords were already quite sharp. But okay, let's add fire too, just to be safe. Upon reaching the target, he unleashes his attack called Meteor Break, increasing the destruction of the place even further. Suddenly, another warrior appears and asks if that's all Kim Hyun-tae has, then asserting that, in that case, it's his turn to play. It's always like this. When you think the fight is over, someone shows up wanting to turn everything into a CrossFit competition. It's revealed that one day, various plants and animals on the planet turned into monsters. Moreover, invaders emerged from different dimensions, starting the era of chaos on Earth. To fight against the creatures, humanity created a guild. Formed by heroes with special powers, it didn't work out with the Avengers, Justice League, Power Rangers, but this time, with a random guild name, maybe it will work. We see the boss of the area, Goator, charging at one of the warriors. Frightened, Hwang Junho from the Karyos Guild questions why the hell the enemy is so strong, quickly realizing he won't be able to block the next attack. Sweating bullets, Yu Jihan gives his all to avoid being crushed. Looking sideways, he shouts to warn that it's time. Classic, when someone says it's time, you never know if it's time for the attack, or for a Starbucks break. Claiming she already knows, a girl unleashes the attack called Blazing Thunder, which hits the monster squarely, making it scream before an explosion occurs. Smiling, Im Si-yoon, who is a mage, asks if the enemy liked it, and says there's no way it survived her attack. But to her surprise, the boss resurges angrier than ever. The guy with glasses manages to act quickly and saves the young woman from death. The glasses didn't give him powers, but they clearly activated the Clark Kent on a budget from Amazon mode. After analyzing the situation, he says that even though the creature didn't take damage, they managed to buy time for Mia Lee. Running, the warrior uses and abuses her attack called Quick Slash, causing the boss to kneel, unaware that something is coming from above. Kim finishes the fight with his Meteor Break attack. We find out that the Karyos Guild is number 1, and the red-haired guy is the leader. There's always a red-haired leader. Statistically, they have more authority in RPGs than in office meetings. Our boy used to be part of the team until one day, after an intense battle, Hyun-tae called him to announce his expulsion. Just like that, out of the blue. Alone and in the rain, the young man laments having worked hard and that no one there needed his presence anymore. In the midst of a lightning storm, the protagonist declares that his story cannot end that way. We discover that his unique ability is called sampling, and its activation happens randomly in special situations. Thus, after being expelled from Karyos, he searched for a new guild for a week until situations. He found the Fun Guild, which has great growth potential. Determined to succeed, Yu breaks into a young woman's apartment, and before hitting the ground face first, he says he's there to join the Fun Guild. Of course, the best way to enter a new team is to literally walk into the boss's house. After a while, he wakes up, with Kim Si-hoo, who is also the guild master, staring at him. Intrigued, the girl asks why the guy wants to join her guild if he's already part of a larger group. Our boy says he will explain everything, and, after a few minutes of conversation, the young blonde states that she understands the situation, but still, he could join larger teams. Classic corporate feedback. I understand your situation. The proto wonders if it would be a good time to talk about his skill. Not receiving any response, Si-hoo takes off her headphones and reveals that she is a mix of elf and human, which means she carries within her the DNA of those who once massacred humans. Staying firm, our boy says he knows she's trying to scare him, but it won't work. Since he has nothing against elves and even thinks they look quite similar to humans, points for diplomacy. Few admit that elves and humans are practically the same people at the drive-thru at 2 a.m. Surprised, the girl says she will think about his request and will get back to him soon. Suddenly, the elf's staff starts to glow intensely, because the sylph spirit, which had been sleeping for 12 years, decided that this was the moment to wake up. Amid all that light, the young woman tries to prevent something from happening, but ends up failing. And after an explosion, she wonders why Sylph made contact with a human, if there's strong light, explosion, and mystery, or if it's ancestral magic, or someone used aluminum foil in the microwave. Again, we see that Yu has just obtained a super rare class, which only 20 people in the world possess, called Elementalist. To become a hero of this type, it is necessary to make a contract with some special being to use its power. Thus, there is the Elementalist of mist, of the sea, of sand, and now, of wind. The elf explains what happened and reveals that Sylph is her deceased mother. A bit startled, the Proto asks if there's no way to cancel the contract, but the young woman says it's too late for that. Unfortunately, mystical contracts don't have an unsubscribe button like fast food newsletters, and support doesn't respond even via DM. Since, when a spirit chooses its owner, it's not easy to make a swap, and the contract remains until the bearer's death. Our boy questions what he should do now. Without answering, Sihu asks if the young man is trying to run away. Denying, he states that there's no chance he will join another guild besides Epic, confident, who needs a plan B when you have conviction, and a wind spirit in the contract. It's almost like the terms and conditions of big tech. Smiling, the elf says that, in that case, she will teach him how to use the wind spirit gradually. But the Prota seems to have other plans. We are taken to the monster area, where, as you progress, the creatures become more powerful. Determined, Jahan says he will test his new powers on the level 5 MA located in Buchan. Noticing the guildmaster restless, he asks if something is happening. A bit awkward, the young woman says that this is her first time in a monster area after the Hero Training Academy, which makes the Prota take the lead. After some time walking, he asks if she knows what kind of monster appears around there. Looking at her phone, the elf says that in that area, the most common is the cockatrice. Analyzing the situation, the Prota concludes that he will need to be both the tank and the damage dealer. Suddenly, Sihu screams that she feels a strange presence behind the car ahead. We see a cockatrice having its afternoon snack. Turning around, our boy asks the young woman to help him from the back. The creature charges without hesitation, but it is quickly blocked, giving space for the elf to unleash her wind arrow strike. An explosion occurs, and when the dust settles, we see that the cockatrice has gone to a better place. The Prota praises his ally for the good work, but the friendly atmosphere is interrupted by the emergence of 3 more monsters. Yu turns around, and his sampling skill activates, to show that if he crouches, he will be able to dodge the attacks. After doing so, the young man uses the acceleration attribute to deliver several blows in quick succession. Shocked, the elf asks if he really just awakened 24 hours ago. Putting away his sword, the protagonist says it's time to loot. But when Sihu was preparing to help him, he suddenly felt something strange and shouted, to warn about a much more dangerous enemy that had just appeared. Using his power, Jihan saves his ally from death. Confused, the elf asks why there is such a monster in a level 5 MA, but our boy has already figured out that it is a variant of the cockatrice. To make matters worse, his ability shows that the chances of victory are only 12%. He asks if the girl can keep up with the creature's movements. She says just a little, as the boy charges into the attack. After getting close enough, Yu asks the guildmaster to act. Obeying, the elf casts the decelerating wind attack, causing ropes to immobilize the enemy. However, the strategy works for only a few seconds and quickly, the creature breaks free. As it lands to deliver a fatal blow, our boy remembers when Kim called him useless and, using the cutting wind, mixed with his fury, sends pieces of the variant flying everywhere. Unbeknownst to him, he is being watched by the Earth Elementalist, Yun Doha. We are taken to the class 2MA, located in Gyeonggi-do, where bizarre creatures with red eyes face Junho's power. Giving it his all, he asks Sion to act immediately. Obeying, the young woman launches her attack called Lightning Chain, causing a huge explosion of yellow lightning. The tanker appears and complains that he was almost hit, but the mage says that's why she told him to lose weight. As they prepare to leave, another creature appears, ready for a snack. The redhead asks Yu for help but quickly remembers that he is no longer part of the team. Fortunately for her, Kim appears and cuts the monster in half with a single blow. With the job done, the mage and the tanker find themselves exhausted. Confused, the big guy asks why the monsters looked so different. The leader approaches and says that, in fact, they were just normal giant worms and, threatening to attack his allies, questions when they started to fear such insignificant enemies. Interrupting the fight, Lee Maya appears with her clothes all dirty and says that the processing of Zone 2 is complete. Furious, the red-haired guy says he already warned her not to act as she pleases anymore, since they no longer have support. Remembering the Prota, Huang states that their lack of success is due to the young man's departure. Denying, Hyuntai says that Yu was just useless. We return to see our boy and his new ally. A little further away, a guy with glasses smiles, claiming he found a gold mine. The elf approaches to ask if the Prota got hurt and, preventing him from hitting his head on the ground, questions what happened. Even weak, Jihan says they need to collect as much as they can, as variants are worth a lot of money. Sihu gets annoyed, as she was genuinely worried, but then asks if there isn't too much for just 2 people. It is at this moment that Zhang Saim appears and introduces himself as the CEO of the monster processing company Mongdong. Curious, our boy asks what a businessman is doing in such an MA. Explaining, the young man says that his company is new and has been doing this to survive, then asking what the duo thinks about leaving the processing of the carcasses to Mongdong. The elf seems to agree, but the Prota senses something strange. The young man puts on his gear and starts examining the material, stating right after that it is definitely worth good money, all without revealing that his true intention is to collect a magic crystal that only appears in variants. Suddenly, a stone structure surrounds him. Frightened, he begs for his life and says he will return the magic crystal. Yundoha appears and asks if the young man was really going to take someone else's item. Surprised, Sihu asks what someone from the Dice Guild is doing in a place like this. Taking the crystal, Yu asks if he is there to try to steal from them too. But the man says that by the association's orders, the variant was his. Even seeing that he has no chance of victory, our boy says he doesn't care about that. Appearing behind him, the Earth Elementalist states that, in fact, he is not a man to ask. Still trapped, Jang wonders why he had to bump into the Earth Dragon. Nervous, the young blonde asks the man to step away from Jihan, but Doha tells her to be quiet unless she wants to be without her partner. Activating his power, the Prota says that, in fact, the one who will die is him, then launching his attack called Breath of the Night. After retreating, the hero asks how that happened, if he had pinned the young man to the ground, quickly realizing that he invoked the element to cancel the damage just in time, which makes him someone very interesting. Our boy discovers that if he continues using elemental magic, he will be done for, and concludes that, indeed, he is no match for a Class 1 hero. Approaching again, the Earth guy suggests they start the second round, but Yu hands over the crystal and surrenders, stating he has no intention of fighting anymore. Unable to violate the surrender decree, the man laments that he can no longer have fun. Suddenly, the association members arrive in 2 helicopters. From above, a woman asks how Yoon dares to act alone like that. With the crystal in hand, he says he has completed the mission and doesn't need anyone bothering him. Before leaving, he asks for our boy's name, and after getting the answer, he asks the young man to participate in the Class 4 promotion test, as he himself will recommend him. Inside the aircraft, the woman says the test is in 2 days and asks how they will send a recommendation letter. However, her words cease when she realizes that the Earth Elementalist has been injured. On his knees, Yang apologizes for his mistake, but the Prota says he should prepare to take a beating. Trying to reverse the situation, the guy says he heard about the test and knows they will need an equipment exchange, so he would like to take the duo to a workshop before anything else. Sometime later, they arrive at the place and Jihan finds it strange that no one else is there. Sihu asks if the young man is trying to pull a fast one on them again. Suddenly, a dwarf blacksmith appears and asks who they are and what they are doing there on his day off. It is revealed that, in that world, the dwarf race is made up of top-class blacksmiths, being the most sought after by heroes for producing S-rank weapons. Taking advantage of the duo's distraction, Saim decides to sneak away. The blacksmith says he is not a dwarf, but a native Korean. Shouting, the Prota asks him to show his ID, and even irritated, the guy complies. Looking at the document, Yu and Sihu wonder if they should report him for identity theft. Freaking out, the elf says they were fooled once again by Yang. Upon hearing the word police, the blacksmith asks if he can take a look at the boy's sword and, with the weapon in hand, reveals that he knows he is a wind elementalist, being a top-class blacksmith. The dwarf runs to check his materials and a few seconds later hands the Prota a sword that embraces the elements, known as the Nam Hoyo's sword, which is his own name. When the day of the promotion test arrives, the duo heads to the designated location, where many people were already waiting. Upon seeing our boy, the other competitors start talking about his expulsion from Karoes, but he can only feel relieved that no one is talking about what happened in Buchen. Someone enters the room and tells everyone to shut up, then states that they are nothing special, and are far below the standard. It is Bang Yunsik, Class 4 examiner. Seeing that his chances of passing are 1%, the Prota wonders if Yoon really wrote the recommendation letter. Elsewhere, the secretary of the Earth Elementalist informs that she sent the letter, but would like to know why he chose that examiner. In the testing area, the competitors rush towards the man in the suit, who, sending everyone flying, says they really are nothing but idiots. A message appears notifying that Team 12 has failed. Watching everything, Hansuk asks if Bang is not exaggerating, while Oh Hyein questions what she will say to the superiors if no one passes. Suddenly, everyone stops to observe our favorite duo, who was recommended by the guildmaster Dice. The boy says they will suffer a bit since the group leader is not usually flexible. We see that to pass, it is necessary to defeat the examiner or receive his recognition. Sihu asks how they expect a Class 5 group to defeat someone so strong. Analyzing the opponent, Yu asks her to take care of the rear, just like she did during the AM. When the signal is given, Bang attacks right away. Our boy is kicked away, but when the blonde girl was about to receive a punch, something stops the examiner, who realizes that the recommendation letter was not a lie. He shakes off the elf and starts running towards the Prota, who, blocking the attack, realizes that the man is indeed very strong, even using a wooden sword. Thus, the young man decides to use the breath of night to create some distance. Doing a somersault, the examiner says that talent is very annoying, not realizing he is about to be attacked from above. We see Yoon again, who, responding to his secretary, says there is no one like Yoonsik, since he has the ability to cut through the wind. On the battlefield, the man delivers his blow called Wave of the Devastating Blade, hitting Jihan in several different spots. On his knees, our boy says he is not as fast as before, especially with that sword, which consumes a lot of mana. The examiner asks how someone so weak managed to get a letter of recommendation, but before he could deliver his final blow, he is stopped by Sihu. Positioning herself in front of the boy, the young woman says she will take care of everything, since she cannot stay in someone's shadow forever. Bang asks why they don't just retreat. However, the elf decides to charge forward, which irritates him. Using her ability to listen to the flow of mana, the young woman manages to dodge the blows and launch a wind arrow. The examiner quickly frees himself but ends up caught in a trap. Surprised, he wonders how a Class 5 can perform multiple conjurations along with a 7-fold magic. A large explosion occurs, but unlucky for the elf. Yoonsik escapes unscathed and, with the sword at her neck, says her attack was too slow, then asking what Yu is waiting for to attack. Angrily, our boy says the man will lose for being too arrogant, attacking next with the Blade of Wind after figuring out how his sword works. We are taken to another place, where a man tells another that the status report of Kim's team is ready. Without turning around, the guy in the pinstripe suit asks if Kang-woo is adjusting well. We find out he is none other than the master of the Karos Guild, Park Jung-sob. The blondie says that, according to the evaluations, the young man is still adapting and, changing the subject, comments on the fact that Yu took the Class 4 promotion exam. Furious, the master questions how that is possible and finds out the boy was recommended by Yoon Do-ha. We return to the training area, where Bang is completely cornered. Realizing he is dealing with an elemental mage, he decides to surrender. Outside, our boy shows relief. Impressed, Sihu asks how her ally adapted to elemental magic so quickly, but even he doesn't know. Smiling, Jihan says the victory only happened because she drew the examiner's attention. But now it's necessary to focus on the interview test. After some time, the name of the Epic Guild is called. In the room, Heen, Han-suk, and Lee Dong-ho from the Warriors Guild comment on the previous group and claim that they do not deserve to be approved. Thinking, our boy realizes that the trio is saying that out loud on purpose. Ending the subject, the guy in the middle says it's impressive that the Epic Guild was the only one to pass the combat test. The duo smiles and says they just got lucky. Being unpleasant, Lee asks to see the blondie's ears, and when she shows them, he says it's a shame she isn't half human. His colleague tells him to watch his words, while Yu tries to control himself from flying at his neck. The elf asks the Prota to stay calm, and so the interview continues, until Dong-ho asks which side Sihu will be on if South Korea is invaded by a group of elves. Saving his friend from embarrassment, our boy asks if the Warriors Guild people have no manners, and states that, from the beginning, they were only interested in attacking the master of his guild. Furious, the man says that as the interviewer, he decides the questions. Not backing down, Jihan says he would rather give up the promotion than go through that kind of humiliation. The elf tries to say something, but gives up when she realizes it's over. Back home, the protagonist apologizes for what happened, but his ally thanks him and says it was the first time someone got angry because of her. Intrigued, the young man asks why she keeps clicking the refresh button then. When the result appears, they stare at each other. Elsewhere, Lee apologizes for the confusion he caused and says he was just curious. We find out that the Epic Guild passed and that the position of the group's first enemy has already been filled. Meanwhile, at MA Pajusi, Hyuntae's team is greeted with shouts by several fans. Being kind, unlike the security guards, the leader asks people to stay back, even though he hates that crowd with all his might. Kangwoo asks if they saw the ugly woman at the entrance and invites his colleagues to go to the club on the weekend to see some pretty girls. Irritated, the mage questions whether he can talk about something else, especially since the team isn't just men. The young man invites her to join, stating that many models are eager to see her. While thinking of a way to approach Lee Mia, suddenly, a trio approaches and the guy in the middle asks where the squire is. The red-haired guy says you left a while ago and introduces the young man with white hair. Unfazed, the man with a scar on his face recalls how the protagonist's skills were unbelievable and asks Kim to pass his contact to him. Kangwoo says that for sure, the guy is overrated. Changing the subject, the leader asks him to hand over his sword, before finishing off a creature that appeared out of nowhere. Nearby, a guard evacuates people from a Class 4 MA, just as Sihu and our boy arrive. Inside a building, the duo faces a saber-tooth. The elf strikes the enemy from the sides, while Jihan cuts it in half with his sword. Once the job is done, he says it will be necessary to call the processing company to move the monsters. Suddenly they hear someone calling for help and run out to assist. But upon entering one of the apartments, they discover the screams were from Jang. After a while, outside, the elf says it must be fate that they met again. The protagonist decides to take it easy and says they got good equipment thanks to the guy and asks if he would agree to sign a monster processing contract since he has good skills. The young man thanks him wholeheartedly and runs off to take care of the corpses in the building. The good mood ends when the Creature Protection Union people show up. It is revealed that the organization's goal is to ensure that monsters and humans coexist in perfect harmony. When questioned, our boy says he doesn't agree with that. But he is prevented from speaking further when some group members breach the barriers and advance. Preparing to attack, he asks what that means. A woman panics upon seeing a dead monster and says she is very sorry on behalf of humans. Knowing that heroes cannot touch ordinary people, Yu decides to wait for the association to arrive. Yoon appears and, asking permission from the UNPC, introduces himself as the one they hate the most. Everyone is startled, and a guy questions what a rank 1 hero is doing there, while our boy wonders if the man has nothing better to do. Smiling, the Earth Elementalist says it's time for all of them to return to hell, then summoning his elemental Mumu. The creature opens its mouth, and yellow ropes emerge, binding the Creature Protection Organization members. Surprised, Jihan says the man's control to avoid hurting anyone is so precise it's absurd. The guy with glasses apologizes for the delay and comments on the fact that they passed the promotion exam. Our boy says it was all thanks to him who assigned a powerful examiner. Moving forward, Doha states that he is now eager to know who is the strongest. The trio is interrupted by members of other guilds and decides to go elsewhere. In a construction area, the hero greets the workers. We find out that this is the HQ of the Dice Guild, which is trying to expand the underground training field. Upon entering the building, the protagonist is impressed by how the construction noise has completely vanished. Sihu is also impressed, but by the size of the magical barrier, which must have cost around 20 billion. Park Yegyong, the vice leader of the guild, appears and is tasked with preparing a room. Pinching the hero's cheek, she asks where he has been since he hasn't fulfilled any commitments. After a brief discussion, the Epic Guild is taken to a room. The man asks if the young man knows why he is there. Being very direct, Jihan says it's because of his elemental. Confirming, Yoon makes Mumu appear in the form of a dog and asks them to greet him. Our boy says the creature looks too different, while it mentions it needs to return to the construction, until it realizes there are more people in the room. While the elf is smitten with the little one, the man asks if the young man can call his elemental. Obeying, the protagonist introduces Sylph. Doha then explains that the only elemental the country has discovered so far was Mumu, and that, after an investigation, he found nothing about that elemental, besides not understanding why the young man left Karos for fun. Therefore, he would like to know how he signed a contract with the Wind Spirit. Taking the lead, Sihu says that Sylph had a different contractor before everything happened. What was your mother, Ernahas? The man is surprised by the revelation and concludes that elementals are much more complex than he imagined. Deciding to get straight to the point, the hero reveals that he is interested in buying the Fun Guild. For nothing more, nothing less than 20 billion. The elf asks if he is serious, confirming. Doha says they can remain a duo or hire more people, and that he will teach you personally. Besides not interfering in the group's actions. Noticing the hesitation, the man says he will give them time to think. But the prota is quicker and refusing, states that the Epic Guild will never be sold. Instead of the previous battle, Jang looks for the team, as he needs to show the incredible item he found. Back in the office, the guy with glasses says he can increase the offer if the boy thinks the amount is low. Our boy says that indeed 20 billion is nowhere near enough, since, just like the Dice Guild, the Epic Guild is going to become huge. Grabbing his ally by the clothes, the blonde girl asks why he is deciding things alone. Bursting into laughter, Yoon asks if Jihan really thinks he will turn a duo into a big guild. The Prota then says he can call it confidence. Giving up the offer, the man decides to hand over the magical crystal of the variant, since the association has already finished its research. Our boy accepts, but asks why he made such a fuss. Suddenly, Sylph approaches the crystal and a very bright flash fills the room. Explaining, the hero says that elementals can grow by consuming the energy of items like that. Therefore, if he continues collecting the crystals, Sylph will be able to materialize just like Moo. We are taken to the UNPC branch, which is determined to keep working until everyone realizes how important its mission is. Suddenly, roars from a rescued saber-toothed tiger interrupt the conversation. Excited, a young woman says she will go get the food, and we discover that the group feeds the creatures with kidnapped old people, while pretending to the whole world that their concern, besides protecting the monsters, is the care of the elderly. Min-Soo Lim, the branch manager, arrives and says he brought beautiful children from his trip, then calling everyone's attention to say that the prototype of a certain thing is ready. It is revealed that the organization is responsible for the variants, approaching the saber-tooth. The man uses his new weapon and says it will look even more beautiful. Upon seeing the result, the rest of the people starts applauding non-stop. We are taken back to the Class 4 MA, which now has a protective barrier to keep intruders away. Yu says that, if they are lucky, they might get another crystal. Jang appears out of nowhere and scares the duo. Shouting, the boy asks why they disappeared out of nowhere and, after making another small drama, reveals that the scars from the other day and the saber-tooth remains were all sold for a fortune. The elf says she knew she was right about him. When the young man was preparing to talk about his commission from the sales, our boy steps in and says he will only receive 4%, not giving any chance for debate. Suddenly, a very cute little creature catches the trio's attention. With her is Min Yuri, from the one-person guild Snowflake. We find out that the woman is known for going around just to take down saber-tooths, but no one knows why. Jihan says it's better for them to go in quickly, before the chinchilla takes everything for herself. Out of nowhere, the creature appears behind him, showing that she heard the comment. Si-Hu asks his friend to be careful, but he says it's fine, as he knows he won't be attacked. Proving the boy right, the chinchilla starts licking him. Her owner approaches and says she didn't expect Chilla to be interested in someone else, starting a round of introductions. Interrupting the woman's thoughts, Saeem introduces himself and offers his services. Before being grabbed by the creature, the scene catches the attention of others nearby. Noticing the situation, Min apologizes and, preparing to enter, wishes good luck. Reflecting, our boy says that, considering how popular the young woman has become, she should have already been promoted to Class 3, but decides to let it go and enter as well. After a while, the elf asks why they still haven't found any monsters. The Prota comments that maybe the other guilds have already cleaned everything out. As they were preparing to go up another floor, Kyungjin from the Knife Guild asks whose voices those are, and if they didn't see the sign that said Buildings 207 to 209 belong to the Knife Guild. We discovered that if a large guild claims a spot, medium guilds have no choice but to accept, especially when the group only has 2 members. But that's not quite what will happen. Yu says that occupying a spot is illegal and therefore will file a complaint against them with the Ministry of Heroes, and after being threatened, he analyzes the situation to see what his chances of victory are. Before launching an attack, the team leader asks for help, and it's Si-Hu's turn to join the fight. The young girl launches her water arrow to combat the fire arrow shot by the enemy, causing an explosion that can be seen even from outside. The duo takes the moment to run, but not to flee, rather to distract. Jihan appears from above and attacks Kyungjin, who wonders if the young man is really from the 4th class. By tripping his opponent, the protagonist ends the battle and, without caring about the man's words, places his sword very close to his eyes. The elf, who took care of the others, suggests they let it go for now, while the guild leader wonders who the hell they are. Trapped behind a wall of fire, one of the tanks doesn't notice the imminent danger, just like his ally, who, when he turns around, it's already too late to do anything. The screams catch the attention of our boy and the elf. Yu decides to use his ability and discovers that the chances of getting out of that place alive are 0.5%. Checking the beast, he comments that it's the first time he's seen such an extreme variation. The 2 guys from the enemy guild start trembling with fear and decide to run away instead of staying and joining the protagonist. The creature begins to approach rapidly, forcing our boy to draw his sword to block the attack. While doing this, he realizes that if he hadn't covered his sword with his element, it would have shattered, and concludes that he needs to end the battle with a single blow as quickly as possible. Si-Hu paralyzes the variant using the slow wind strike, giving the perfect opening for the boy to use the wind blade. The problem is that the monster manages to dodge and counterattack right after, throwing the protagonist away. Worried, the elf shoots wind arrows, but it's of no use and the enemy charges straight at her. Chilla enters the battle and saves the young girl just in time. The 2 creatures fly out of the building, Min approaches and says she heard an explosion and decided to check, but didn't expect to find them there. Then, she asks the elf to take care of the young man while she handles the variant. As she knows saber-toothed cats better than anyone, we see that Chilla is winning the fight but ends up getting bitten. Screaming to warn, the woman launches her attack called Ice Rain, which resolves things for just a few seconds. Along with her pet, Yuri plans what his next step will be. Then performing a blizzard shot and taking advantage of the greatest weakness of a saber-tooth, maneuverability. The plan works, and finally the monster goes down, as, with its muscles contracted, due to the cold, its joints end up shattering. The elf watches everything impressed, but then remembers the protagonist, who, still on the ground, says they need to help the ice girl quickly. We see that his ability revealed that Min doesn't have many chances of winning. Down below, the woman prepares to finish the job, but the variant starts roaring to call its army, which is made up of all the saber-toothed cats in the complex. Yu asks if Sihu knows how to use levitation, and she says only to a certain extent. Grabbing the young girl by the waist, he says she should use it at his signal, jumping through the hole right after, while stating that this is the only way. Yuri manages to take down some monsters, but another one appears behind him, forcing Chilla to act to save her. Completely surrounded, the young girl concludes that she needs to kill the variant soon. In the air, our boy asks his friend to use levitation. She obeys. The problem is that her spell isn't powerful enough to stop them mid-air. With nothing else to do, the boy uses his wind bomb and, aiming at the target, focuses on repeating what he did with the other variant. Both hit the ground, and he realizes that, even trying to be as efficient as possible, he still spent too much mana. Running, the tamer remembers that she asked them to stay out of the fight and insists she doesn't need help. Intrigued, our boy asks what her problem is with saber-toothed cats. Chilla appears to warn that part of the creatures is still alive, but Jihan notes that in fact, it is the variant that continues to summon helpers. In addition to having a healing ability, hearing that makes Min remember something tragic that happened in his past. Cutting through his thoughts, the protagonist says that if they work together, it might be possible to win. But he ends up being ignored and doesn't understand why the young woman is acting so recklessly. After eliminating the small ones, the tamer comes face to face with the variant. However, she gets distracted, giving it the opportunity to act. Our boy appears and says that if he were the monster, he wouldn't eat cold food, then delivering a blow with his sword, leaving the enemy with one less paw. Chilla focuses on the normal cats, while the elf launches her wind arrows. When everything was going well, Yuri steps in front and prevents Yu from delivering the final blow, claiming that she needs the variant alive. The Proto questions if she has gone mad, but the young woman simply says she won't let him pass. Suddenly, something starts happening to the creature, which ends up attracting the others. Another person enters the battle and, controlling gravity, calls the trio amateurs. Agreeing, a man says he is disappointed to see they can't handle simple felines, revealing next that who is in the area is Bang Yunsik's team. Watching everything from the top of a building, Min Sulim says he couldn't wait for the big guys to show up and, when asked, he says it's time to retreat, since the liquefied mana crystal has fused with the variant's body and, at that point, there's nothing more to be done. Thus, they should just continue as planned. Down below, Yunsik says that the hero department has a lot to resolve due to the state of the monster. Because of this, the elf, the Prota, and the ice girl are sent out of the AM. A week later, at the Fun Guild headquarters, Zhang asks what happened in the monster area, but our boy once again says he can't tell. We find out that 8 heroes died that day, due to the onslaught of saber-tooth cats. Reflecting, Yu concludes that everything happened so perfectly that it can't have been just coincidence. The phone rings and he wonders who would call the guild on a direct line. To his surprise, on the other end of the line is Min. Apologizing, she says it was the only way she found to contact him. The two chat a bit about how things are going until the young woman decides to get straight to the point and schedule a meeting for that day. The information leaves Saim in shock. Elsewhere, Sihu talks to her father, who heard about the variant and called to check on her. Kim Jaeono expresses relief that his daughter can count on Jihan and says he hopes to meet him one day, especially since the young man inherited the element from his late wife. A woman calls him to review a sample, and he ends the call stating he will go to Korea on the anniversary of the young woman's mother's death. Alone, she decides to tidy up the house, but her phone starts ringing once again. In the city, our boy is all dressed up waiting for the ice girl. She approaches and is relieved to know that he just arrived too. The two head to a restaurant, unaware that they are being followed. Fuming, the elf is sure that the Tamir is trying to steal her ally. The duo of spies follows the couple everywhere, and in their minds, it is clear that this is a date. Even saying she doesn't care, Sihu can't understand why she is so irritated. The sun begins to set, and Yu says the day was very fun. Min agrees. But her expression changes when he asks what the real reason for the meeting is. With no way out, the young woman says she would like him to accompany her to a place. They arrive at the hospital and she reveals that her sister is being treated there. Upon entering the room, the prota's ability activates and he discovers that Soyeon has mana discoloration syndrome. It is at this moment that Yuria reveals that she and her sister were attacked by saber-toothed cats 4 years ago, which left the girl in that state. That's why she has been hunting the creatures for answers. But now that she has discovered that it is impossible to extract a cure from the monsters, she would like to apologize for the other day. While looking at the young woman, our boy realizes that she is a central figure for the growth of his guild, and remembers that the same happened when he saved Jang, which is why he hired him, to see how his ability would respond. The prota concludes that he is on a mission, and to complete it, he will need 3 more people. Even feeling a bit dizzy, he claims he will do whatever it takes, then asking how long the ice girl has been hunting the creatures. Upon hearing it's been 4 years, Jihan questions if she doesn't think it's time to consider another way. Min is left confused, and he decides to give an example using a medicine that has a common ingredient called Centella asiatica, or Indian pennywort, which grows in mountains and fields, having anti-inflammatory and antibacterial properties. Thus, even if the plants have nothing to do with the reason for the injuries, they still end up being part of the healing process, which means that the cure for Soyeon might lie in something different from saber-toothed cats, something the tamer already knew, but continued hunting the creatures to satisfy her desire for revenge. Getting straight to the point, our boy says he would like to officially recruit her and, in exchange, he will do what he can to help her find a cure for her sister. Using his ability, Yu realizes that there's no way to know if the girl will recover. Yuri asks for time to think about the proposal, and he decides to just give her space. Leaving the room, the protagonist hands over the bracelet he received from Syme to the girl and says it's a lucky charm. The tamer thanks him, and thus, they bid farewell. We are taken to the Karos Guild headquarters, where Park is irritated by someone's delay for the meeting. We see that the someone was Yoon, who arrives complaining about the scheduled time. Junil, master of the Warriors Guild, asks if he has no shame in keeping everyone waiting. Furious afterward upon hearing a joke about what happened to his guild in the Class 1 MA. Finding humor in the situation, Baek Gangcheon asks if they really need to act like children and, when called out for a confrontation, says he wouldn't waste his time with someone so weak. Minjung, master of the Snowball Guild, questions why men need to have such fragile masculinity. Doha mocks and says that time hasn't been very generous to her. A suited man starts the meeting and says they were called there due to a new development involving the incident in the Class 4 MA, revealing next that there were signs of UIPC involvement. Excited, Yoon asks if this means they will go straight to the organization's headquarters. Calling him a fool, the red-eyed woman says that the UIPC operates globally and mere evidence doesn't give them permission to attack. Agreeing, the mediator says they need to be very careful so the situation doesn't get out of control. He then starts showing a video of the variant, which is quite different from the normal monster, before talking about other similar cases that have occurred recently. Junil asks why the man is sharing all this, and he explains that it's because a DNA study of the variants showed they have a new genetic combination, involving mana crystals, which, unlike the natural ones, were artificial and in their liquid form. When questioned, Doha states that she knows nothing about this subject, but has no doubts about who is responsible for this type of experiment. Beck asks what all this has to do with the UIPC, and the suited man says that on the day of the incident, many suspicious individuals were seen using the MA as an excuse, and one of those people captured by a drone is Lim Min-soo, who, 4 years ago, was fired from his position as a researcher from the Magical Engineering Department for stealing a mana crystal to conduct experiments on humans. Therefore, everyone there has the duty to stop him. We return to see Yu, who is worried about the fact that Sihu isn't responding to his messages, while also thinking about how he will pay the tamer if she agrees to join the guild. He gets into a taxi, and the driver recognizes him as a hero. Besides knowing the epic guild for living in the apartment area that was attacked by saber-toothed cats. In the middle of the conversation, a hybrid girl catches their attention, and the taxi driver reveals how prejudiced he is. The protagonist understands because humans have been attacked several times, but concludes that the girl was just a child and doesn't deserve that judgment. Looking out the window and seeing 2 men following the girl, he warns that he will get out. The young girl starts to run but ends up being captured. The men then comment that the VIPs will be very happy to see such a young hybrid. Jihan appears and says they have 3 seconds to release the girl. However, when he goes for the attack, a very large guy appears and tells him to mind his own business. At the Fun Guild headquarters, Jang asks why Sihu isn't responding to the protagonist's messages. Screaming, she says that they are not messages from the young man, but rather SPAM. However, upon seeing that the last text was about a kidnapping, her eyes widen. At the fight location, our boy asks if the big guy works for the kidnappers. He does not respond, only says it's time for him to die. His punch hits the ground as the protagonist dodges and takes the opportunity to appear behind the enemy, just in time to block the next attack. Noticing that the man used mana, he wonders if he is also a hero. The other two guys take advantage of the distraction and take the girl to a van. Without giving you any chance, the enemy resumes throwing punches, which concludes that he has no choice but to finish off his opponent with a single blow. Suddenly, another person arrives and says he will not allow them to destroy the whole block, stating next that our boy is lucky because they are in a hurry. After reprimanding Sayo 13, the white-haired guy and the big guy simply disappear. Knowing that something is very wrong, the protagonist leaps into the air to analyze the best route to reach the van using his sampling ability. In the middle of the way, his phone rings and he explains to Sihu what happened, then asks her to call the police. Worried, the elf thinks about how hate crimes between species have been increasing. Jihan arrives at the location where the van is parked, right in the middle of the forest. Inside the car, a young man takes a nap, but upon hearing a noise and looking out the window, he panics. Our boy breaks the glass and prevents him from alerting the others, then ordering him to get out of the vehicle so they can have a chat. With the young man completely subdued, the hero orders him to tell exactly what is happening there. We are taken inside the abandoned mansion, where several hybrids are found tied up. A suited man approaches and shows another man the product of the day, claiming that this is the human-cat hybrid that the VIP client requested. In a panic, the girl starts screaming and says she will give them as much money as they want. However, the group leader says he doesn't need any change, as he will receive 900 million for her sale. With tears in her eyes, the young girl looks around, praying for someone to appear and save her. Stepping back, the man asks his employee to hide the bodies somewhere before the clients arrive. Screaming, the hybrid asks if they know that doing this is illegal, but the boss tells her to come back to reality and remember that no one cares about hybrids, especially after what happened to humans. Determined to escape, the girl starts to activate her power but realizes her mana is blocked. The suited guy puts her head against the ground and says they injected her with a mana suppressor, just in case. With the message delivered, the leader asks him to take the hybrid to the reception. Suddenly, a loud crash occurs, caused by the protagonist's hands, who decided to enter the place through the ceiling. Looking at the criminals, he gives the order to arrest them for being a hero. Surprised, the suited man says he thought the others had taken care of the boy. Glancing around the environment, our boy concludes that the situation is even worse than he thought and states that he has changed his mind about waiting for the police, as the criminals are clearly nothing but monsters. Kneeling, the leader begs for his life and says he is just following orders, revealing next that he was just buying time for his accomplices to attack. The problem is that they don't know how fast Yu is. In a few seconds, everyone is on the ground, leaving only the boss, who meets his end shortly after. Once the tape is removed from her mouth, the hybrid asks who the boy is, and without answering, he says he is there to help her, and asks if she can provide a statement when the police arrive. When asked about the others, he says that no one else in that room managed to survive. Hearing this makes the girl start to cry. Even wanting to comfort her, the protagonist knew there was nothing he could say to improve the situation. Outside, Sihu waits for news. Elsewhere, Lim thanks for the sample he received and states that it was almost possible to manipulate the mana crystal with 100% accuracy. The mysterious guy says he heard about what happened and asks if the organization can still operate normally. Even with the association watching, upon hearing yes, he says he doesn't want any trouble coming his way, commenting next about the delay in the supply line due to Jihan's interference. After taking what seems to be liquid crystal, the branch manager says he will take care of the boy personally. We return to the factory where only 12 children were found alive. Sihu approaches and asks if it was the Prota who took care of everything. He says yes, and that he couldn't arrive in time to save everyone, but that all the culprits have been arrested. Seeing a gloomy look on the young woman's face, the boy realizes he understands a bit of what she is feeling. However, he concludes that it was necessary to leave the criminals alive to find out what is really going on. Turning around, our boy tells the police officer about the VIP client who is arriving. The man says he will investigate and informs that one of the victims wants to speak with the young man. We find out that the hybrid asked the duo to take her home instead of the police. Her residence is at the Casa da Criança Seu Azul, a center for young and vulnerable individuals of all species. At the door of the place, a woman calls for Rixus. The little girl runs out and, upon hugging the woman, apologizes for what happened, even though she is a victim. Yoon Young introduces herself as the director of the Casa da Criança, then thanks the young people for saving the hybrid before inviting them for a cup of tea. Inside, Yu comments on how quiet the place is, and the director says it's because the children are already asleep. Showing that this isn't entirely true, 3 children come out of a door and run to hug the young girl who was rescued. Rixus says she will put the trio to sleep and find them later. In the living room, the woman says that when she received the call from the police, she was so disturbed that she ended up telling the truth to the children. Sihu asks if none of the other victims lived there. Denying, the director says the others are from nearby facilities. Interrupting the conversation, Layla appears with tea and, upon learning that it was the duo who saved the hybrid, thanks them. Yoon then reveals that, 4 years ago, 2 children from the house were kidnapped, but only the young redhead managed to return alive. Nervous, the elf asks if there is anything they can do to help. The woman says no, as in the past other groups offered help but were not honest. Thus, when Layla disappeared, only the Dice Guild helped. Because of this, many benefactors from other species hold a grudge against the heroes. Showing her ears, the blonde girl says the director doesn't need to worry about the conflict between humans and hybrids in this case. Affirming next that even after suffering a lot of prejudice, she understood that there are those who choose to understand rather than judge. While looking at the two, the woman finally feels a glimmer of hope. That ends up reaching Rixus's heart, hidden behind the door. After leaving the Casa de Crianza, Sihu apologizes to Yu. He says she doesn't need to do that, but she should know that the donations will greatly affect the guild's budget. Even so, he will support her in any decision, as long as it is not harmful. Seizing the moment, the young woman asks why the boy met with Min without telling her. Interrupting the conversation, Rixus bursts in shouting and says she was so in shock earlier that she couldn't even thank them properly. The little girl hands the duo an artifact from Karlem, the world she once called home, as proof of her gratitude. The gesture surprises the young people, especially because the item is a large mana crystal. At the Epic Guild headquarters, the elf shows irritation upon learning that the Proto recruited Yuri. To justify himself, he says that, as a rank 4 guild, it's time for them to open their doors to new talents. The blonde girl feels embarrassed, remembering that she thought the two were on a date. When asked if it is really possible to recruit someone like the Tamer, our boy says they will only know if they try, and that it's not every day that an opportunity like this comes along. Playing tough, Sihu says that next time he should talk to her before doing anything. Completely changing the subject afterward, she asks when they will use the crystal. Jihan says he was thinking of handing it to Sylph, but remembered it could be a good learning opportunity. The elemental doesn't seem to like the idea, as when summoned, it starts desperately trying to hide. Until, after a brief conversation, it decides to approach the crystal. Preventing Sylph from feeding, the Proto says that if she continues to act like a spoiled child, she won't gain anything, then giving her small tasks to do. Thinking, Sihu says that his mother treated the little being like a close friend, but the boy treats it like a pet. After doing everything that was asked, the elemental moves towards the crystal, causing an explosion of light, much more intense than the last time. Seeing that the sphere is cracking, Yu wonders if the little one is really materializing. Another explosion occurs, and when he opens his eyes, he realizes he is in another place. A voice emerges, saying that the young man doesn't need to panic, and that this is a virtual space. Confused, the protagonist says he didn't know she could speak and discovers that this space is temporary. With little time left, the elemental says they are being targeted and that, just as she was able to restore her strength, other enemies are doing the same. So the boy must keep an eye on the people around him, since those we trust the most are often the ones with the most to hide. Unable to reveal her identity, Sylph asks our boy to protect Sihu, as this is the will of Erna Hath and the reason why he was chosen as a successor. Concluding the conversation, the mysterious being says the young man will understand everything in time. The protagonist wakes up with the elf by his side and, seeing her concern, tells her what happened. Interrupting the conversation, the fairy appears, showing her new form. We are taken to the UIPC branch, where Lim talks with Psi-013 and Psi-015 about the last kidnapping that resulted in the loss of the delivery base. The white-haired creation tries to explain herself, but ends up being interrupted by the scientist, who orders them to bring Jihan's head. Suddenly, a man bursts into the room, to warn that the heroes have invaded the place and are capturing everyone in the office, under the orders of the association. We go back to moments before when Bang was called by Doha, who, being very direct, said he needed him to arrest a manager from IUPC and everyone working for him. When asked if the heroes department signed the arrest, the elementalist simply says he decided to take a risk, because if they keep following protocols, they won't get anywhere. Before ending the conversation, he reveals that someone from the association is working with the enemies, so it's better not to form a team with other guilds and to be extra careful. In the present moment, Yunsik realizes that no one there seems to be a big threat. Another hero approaches and says that no one wants to say where the manager is. A guy on the floor says that everyone there will die when someone arrives. Impatient, the examiner asks the young man to spill the beans. Obeying, he says that the blessed ones are on their way. Suddenly, the group starts to feel something approaching. We see that it is the two creations of the scientist. Smiling, the white-haired boy says he was indeed looking for someone to vent his anger. Realizing the danger, Bang asks if the duo knows where Minsu is. Psy-015 says he knows, but that it doesn't matter, since they will become lifeless shells in no time. Drawing her sword, the heroine protects herself from the blow, but the creature takes the office staff hostage. Noticing that his ally got distracted, the ninja rushes in and saves her from Psy-013's attack, clearing the way for the young man in white to strike and slam the enemy's face into the ground. Zeraqueens realizes it's time to flee, but ends up being hit by Yunsik. On the ground, he concludes that the reports were wrong, as they didn't mention how strong the man was. When everyone gathers, the examiner says he needs an update on the injured. The white-haired creation starts laughing and asks what Psy-013 is waiting for to drink the blessing, then showing that he has already had his dose. At the Dice Guild headquarters, Jigyong asks what Sihu and Yu are doing there. The elf then says they need to see Yoon, but the woman says he isn't there. A guy rushes in to warn that they lost contact with Bang's squad. Upon hearing about the IUPC, our boy asks what is happening. Inside the helicopter, the vice leader of the guild explains how everything happened even though it's classified information and says the plan was for all guilds to launch a collective investigation within a few days. Intrigued, the elf asks why the Dice Guild decided to act alone and finds out it's because Doha doesn't trust the other groups. So they started their own investigation, but now that contact has been lost. They can't call for reinforcements without exposing everything, taking the lead. The protagonist says that since they are still a new guild, no one will suspect anything. Besides, it's not a very complicated task to sneak in. We see that your true objective is to test Sylph's new abilities. When asked to use the levitation skill, Sihu questions why the hell the guy wants to jump from the aircraft. Without waiting, he says they don't have time to think, throwing himself right after. Inside the branch, Yunsik wakes up from a faint and, startled, asks if his allies are okay. But, to his surprise, everyone is on the ground, showing no signs of life. It is at this moment that he realizes he is missing an arm and starts to scream. At the same time, he blames himself for everything that happened. Psy-015 appears and asks if the man is really going to lie on the ground crying, instead of getting up and facing his new version. Psy-013 appears, and we see that his new form is that of a gorilla. On the ground, the swordsman concludes that the bodies of the enemies merged with monsters and states that he needs to tell Doha everything immediately. Han-seok wakes up and, crying, apologizes for not being able to protect the others. Seeing the boy's eyes, the commander asks him to stay still and wait for reinforcements. With his hand on his face, the hero tells the man to leave everything behind and get out of there as fast as possible. Suddenly, the gorilla appears and completely crushes him. Furious, Bang charges into attack, claiming he will kill the creatures. However, he ends up being sent flying by 13. Finding it amusing, 015 tells the big guy not to kill the man, as they will take him and use him to get information about the hero's plans. Yu appears and says that in fact no one is going to leave there. Startled, Sihu insists that they need to call for reinforcements urgently, but our boy knows it's too late for that. Remembering Lim's orders, the big guy charges at the boy, who tells his ally that he will handle the situation alone, while she stays back to avoid getting hurt if something goes wrong. The time has come for Sylph to shine. With the elemental's mana, the Prota uses his sword against the gorilla and delivers a blow called Aura Blade, causing a very strong flash. It is revealed that elemental manipulation, born from a real connection with an elemental, works on a completely different level. However, for Yu, connecting with his elemental was the easiest part, as his biggest problem was the lack of mana. Now that Sylph has evolved, there are no more limits, and he has finally become a true wind elementalist. Seeing his ally being crushed with a single blow, 015 wonders how that is possible. As it disappears, the creature continues repeating the orders it received. Seeing the strange purple glow in the monster's mana, the Prota perfectly understands how the mutation works, and, facing what is left, he states that this time, fleeing is not an option, which means that, one way or another, he will reveal everything the IUPC is planning. Even knowing he is no match for the young man, the monster seems more afraid of returning empty-handed. Playing dirty, he takes Bang hostage and says he will break the man's neck if the duo doesn't back off. Lowering his sword, our boy says that if the creature leaves the hero alone, he will do what was asked. Smiling, Psy-015 concludes that now he just needs to delay them a little longer until reinforcements arrive. But he ends up discovering the worst way that the boy was bluffing. Delivering another blow, Jihan says he didn't expect him to be so naive. The creature doesn't understand how it was hit, even being in its second form, but now there is nothing more to be done. With his opponent defeated, the Prota questions once again what the IUPC is planning and where Lim is. However, the monster only says that now it understands why the manager sees the boy as a threat and extends an invitation for him to join the group of the blessed. Upon receiving a no, the creature says that the young man is just a clueless child and that he will soon discover what his boss's plan is. Desperate, Sihu tries to talk to Bang, who, trembling all over, asks what she is doing there. Upon hearing that Park sent them as reinforcements, he feels embarrassed by his situation. Obeying the orders not to move too much, the commander asks if one of the monsters was defeated. The elf says he doesn't need to worry, as Jihan took care of both. Not understanding, the hero says he is still sensing a large amount of mana coming from some enemy. Surprising the prota, someone asks what is happening there and, upon receiving a sword slash as a response, says that he shouldn't be swinging such a sharp blade around a woman. Not understanding anything, our boy wonders who the hell that is. Getting closer, the young woman says he is her type. Yu denies the dating request while wondering if he is dealing with yet another experiment. Jerry notices Psi-015's presence and says he will catch a cold if he keeps lying on the floor. The creature asks for another crystal, but receives a punch right in the face as a response. Having finished the job, the young woman turns her attention to the prota and states that he only has one chance. Confused, he asks why she killed her own ally. Mocking, the girl says that people like that are just dead weight and only serve to slow things down. Launching into an attack, she claims she can't stand those who can't keep their mouths shut. Sylph springs into action to protect the young man. The enemy is surprised but ends up being pushed back with force, causing an explosion. Our boy decides to return to where Sihu was. But Jerry shows that she is still very much alive and very interested in him. With no choice, the protagonist concludes that he will have to deal with the young woman first. When the elemental returns to the blade, he delivers a fatal blow, but realizes that his enemy escaped at the last second. Being quick as well, Yu manages to block the surprise attack and, using his sample ability, concludes that there is no way the girl can dodge his next attack. His conclusion proves wrong when she escapes once again. A little distance away, Jerry says that it seems it wasn't just luck when he defeated the other creations. Our boy decides to use his aura blade once more to end this. Excited, the villainess starts to run, claiming she is ready. Determined to blow the whole place up if necessary, Jihan prepares to attack, but Lim appears and reprimands her ally, introducing himself right after. Irritated, the young woman asks what the man is doing there, even after she said she would handle everything. After discussing 015 and 013, the scientist asks her to collect the mana crystals from the bodies and leave. Putting his sword to the man's neck, our boy says that, in fact, no one is leaving there. Then he issues an arrest warrant. Upon hearing that reinforcements are coming, the enemy says that was exactly what he was waiting for. Since everything that has happened so far is part of his plan, Yu feels a very dense mana and starts to lean on his sword to avoid collapsing. Staring at the young man, the scientist says that, in fact, his plan was for all 6 guild masters to show up. The prota realizes he is working with someone from the association and is surprised. Smiling, the man asks if it never crossed his mind that the organization might have an infiltrator. In the president's office, Yoon Junyoung says it's time. Yoon appears outside the room and says that, apparently, the man is in a hurry, then asking what it feels like to be a traitor. Before he can say anything, the president is brutally attacked. Pinned against the wall, he asks what the reason for this is. Impatient, the hero states that he is the only one who could have leaked the hero department's information to the IUPC. Deciding not to continue with the theatrics, the man shows his scared face and asks how long Doha has known, since he was very careful and covered his tracks perfectly. Smiling, the elementalist says that his instincts never fail and that he never liked him much, that, even though he is not a hero, he acted like one. Starting his transformation, Yun states that he didn't get this far by flattering anyone and, revealing his new body, says that the IUPC's advancements are beyond anything Yun can imagine. Mocking, the guy with glasses asks if he was fused with a bat. Rushing to attack, the president says that the era of heroes is over and he will ensure that everyone is eliminated. Using only one hand, Doha creates a stone shield. But the enemy manages to break through as if the barrier were nothing. The hero holds and tears off the bat's arm while saying that he actually prefers hand-to-hand combat. Unfazed, Junyoung launches the Dark Pulse attack, making the elementalist realize that his body has indeed been fused with that of a monster. Due to the blow, a crater forms in the wall. Feeling very powerful, the president says it's no wonder the members of the Dice Guild were eliminated like ants. Showing that he is doing very well, Yoon says he hates noisy monsters and, affirming that a hero is always ready to risk his life, says that, for sure, Bang was not taken down so easily. Irritated, he decides to summon Mumu, who starts to swallow the entire building, while Yoon finds himself trapped in an earthly prison. Surprisingly, the big bat starts to laugh and says that, as an excuse for conducting a joint investigation targeting the IUPC, it was possible to secure many heroes, including those from the 6 largest guilds. Thus, with them out of the city, the plan will finally be initiated. On the street, a little boy asks his mother what that thing in the air is. Everyone starts to run from the monster, which ends up being paralyzed by Minjong, to the luck of the woman and the child. However, in other parts of the city, terrifying creatures are having a feast. Doing his part of the job, Junil says he was really getting bored. Hyuntae is also in the midst of the chaos, not understanding where so many enemies came from, while trying to focus on reaching Class 1. Shocked, Junyoung asks where so many heroes came from. Doha then says he called everyone who was out of the city, as well as sending someone to the branch. We see Bayek flying, while admiring how beautiful the building is before entering, and asking if the scientist minds if he disrupts the party a little. Everyone turns around as they feel the presence of the leader of the best guild in the nation, also known as the most powerful hero in Korea. Stammering, the guy with glasses asks why he is there and not taking care of the monster invasion. The hero then says that someone really wanted his presence in that place. Greeting then, our boy, before questioning if he would have allied with Minsu. The prota asserts that he would never do that, while thinking about how the boy's mana is even more intense. Gangchon says that even if no one from the Dice Guild has noticed, he still plans to take everyone who is there. Soon after, he uses the revealed daydream. Worried, the scientist asks Jerry to forget the mana crystals, as they need to get out of that place soon. Smiling, the hero says that in fact, there is no way out anymore, since everyone is inside his dream palace, from where no one leaves without his permission. Yu finds himself unable to believe how a single person was able to create such a large virtual space, but decides that it is no longer time to waste. The hero prevents the young man from attacking, moving his position. Since Lim had slightly darker plans, totally transformed, the scientist shows excitement at being able to confront such a powerful hero. We see that the final result of his research is quite macabre, as it involves many variants. Beck says that maybe the man has a backup plan, so Jihan should stay out of the fight. Our boy tries to contest, but it doesn't help much. Upon hitting a wall after trying to attack, the villain starts to get irritated. However, he concludes that soon the boy's mana will be completely drained because of the size of the structure. Thus, he just needs to make him keep expending energy. Preparing for battle, the hero asks Yu to just sit and watch, then performing a multiple conjuration. That cuts the enemy's body at different points. Not caring, Minsu says that, thanks to the mana crystals, his recovery is almost instantaneous, but ends up being caught off guard by Gangchun, who asks if the man will continue healing himself even after he wipes the floor. The impact of the dimensional obliteration makes the prota shield his eyes. Seeing what is left of the enemy, the hero questions how he is still alive. Lim then says that all his crystals were destroyed except for one. Impatient, the boy steps on what remains and says that he talks too much. Jerry enters the scene, stating that he cannot let the scientist die. We discover that one of the flaws of the Dream Palace is the fact that it consumes tons of mana, and moreover, for this ability to be used, the user needs to keep a safe distance, since if someone gets too close, the distortions can backfire and the user becomes very exposed. That is why the hero always keeps his enhanced perception activated. But this time, the girl sneaked in so well that he completely forgot she was in the room. Without turning around, the boy asks if the girl is an Azesian, stating that he knows this species very well, as he was responsible for their extermination. It is revealed that 14 years ago, the Azesians invaded Earth and started a war, even changing the planet's course. Curious, the hero asks why the enemy joined the IUPC and if it was for revenge. Laughing, Jerry says she has no reason to take revenge on a bunch of losers and that she only did that because a world taken by chaos is much more fun. That is why she cannot let Minsu die, since her boss has great plans for the man. Baek asks if the girl is talking about the Azesian leader who died years ago. The same then says that maybe he is alive, but now it's time to end the conversation. Smiling, the hero asks her to look at the threat behind her. As he gets close enough, Yu strikes with the aura blade, causing a huge explosion. Appearing again, Gangcheon says that the young man could have cut him in half. While thinking about how impressive wind manipulation really is, Jerry appears, showing that Azesians are hard to kill. Upon discovering that the young woman managed to open a spatial rift, our boy prepares to attack, but the hero stops him and says that doing so is useless. Thinking, he remembers that only two people understand his magic so well, being Doha and the Azesian leader. Before disappearing, the young woman states that they will meet again. All this story leaves Bayek worried, since if the enemies are planning an attack, Korea is not the only target. The prota reveals that he heard the whole conversation and asks if it wasn't the Azesians who broke the peace treaty. Without answering, the hero warns that they will go to Seoul and, upon hearing about the Dice Guild members, claims that he will send reinforcements to help them. In the middle of the trip, our boy starts to feel nauseous and wonders why he wasn't warned about this earlier. We are taken to the city, where Saim is cornered by a creature. Suddenly, Sihu calls and he asks why she left him alone in the middle of that chaos. It's at this moment that the elf discovers that the monsters are in the city. In the middle of the conversation, the monster finds the place where the boy is hiding. But before the worst could happen, someone saves the skin of the scrap collector, being none other than Kim Jiono. former Class 3 hero and father of the elf. Beck and Jihan arrive in Seoul. Our boy lets it all out and says he feels like his insides have turned inside out. Explaining the chaos, the hero says that the city is in ruins thanks to the IUPC. Furious, the young man asks why they would do this. Due to the confusion of the heroes' association, Gangchen says that the next stop is the Dice Guild. Knowing that there is a chance of encountering someone unexpected, the prota concludes that he needs to keep his eyes wide open. Doha appears and says that he wasn't the only one waiting for the duo. Junil and Minjong complain about the delay, while Yu realizes that he is among the best in all of Korea. Park also appears and, distressed, asks what happened to Yoonsik and the squad. Our boy says he is sorry and reveals that the commander was the only one who survived. Completing, he then adds that he is very injured and will be brought by the members of Red Hall. Nervous, the Earth Elemental asks his ally what happened at the site. The hero apologizes for not saving anyone, but at least found out that the Azesians are still alive, including Rias, responsible for the war 14 years ago. The leader of the warriors shouts that this is impossible, but the heroine reprimands him, reminding him that the agreement was to never mention what happened when everyone was together. Furious, Yoon states that if he finds out that Beck is wrong, he will twist his neck like that of a chicken. Jihan doesn't understand the reason for the nervousness and tries to find out who the unexpected person is that will appear. A little further away, the Karios Guild spots the heroes and decides to go to them. Kim shows himself against it and says that this is the moment to show what the group is capable of doing. Kangwoo spots Yu and asks who he is and why he is talking to the guild masters. Upon seeing the boy, the red-haired guy recalls the day he expelled him and asked him not to hate him for it, since it was all a matter of safety. But when pressured by the prota, he reveals that he thinks he is a useless meddler who can't even help properly since he has no skill. It was on that day that our boy stated that no matter how hard the man tries, he will never be able to reach rank 1. Upon hearing the name Jihan, Jaeono, who was nearby, asks if the people know where he can find him. We are taken to the branch where the Red Hall members are looking for the Dice Guild heroes. A soldier finds only Bang and asks where the woman they said would be with him is. Everyone is caught by a binding magic and the elf comes out of her hiding place, asking if it was the IUPC who sent them. Taking off his helmet, one of the responsible shows that he knows Sihu and says that the world is indeed small. It is Yeonji Jong, who also attended the Hero Academy. In the city, the Kuro's leader asks who the man is, and he replies that he is just a civilian. Furious, Kim says that if he wants to leave there alive, he better reveal his identity at once. Saim steps in and says he can explain. The young man introduces himself and the man. Shun is shocked to find herself face to face with a legend, and claims that Jaeono is the veteran hero responsible for guiding everyone to victory in the devastating war 10 years ago. Smiling, the man says she might have exaggerated a bit, while the young woman asks for an autograph. Baek appears and says that if the red-haired guy keeps frowning like that, he will end up with more wrinkles. Everyone is startled, as they neither saw nor felt the hero approaching. He then says he came to see who was spying on them, asking next what the elf's father is doing in Korea. Being direct, the old man says he has family matters he cannot ignore, revealing right after that today is the anniversary of Erna's death. Hearing this makes Gangcheon a bit uncomfortable. He moves and appears next to the researcher to invite him for a drink. Saim hears Jihan's voice and starts running in his direction. It is at this moment that the protagonist notices the presence of his old guild and greets Kim, who, still nervous, says the young man shouldn't think he's special just because he met some rank 1 heroes. Our boy says the man hasn't changed at all and continues to act like a child. Then, recalling what he said during the conversation about his expulsion, hearing that again awakens the red-haired guy's anger. He ends up being stopped from attacking by Doha. Laughing, he says he held back and didn't expect to bury the man's face in the ground like that. Seeing everyone leave, Hyuntae promises that he will make the young man pay for that humiliation. With everyone gathered, the elf's father reveals that he knew about the Azesians and says he has been observing traces of mana from the creatures all over Japan. Jun-il concludes that Baek was indeed telling the truth, while our boy discovers that the unexpected person he was going to meet was the researcher. Getting straight to the point, the man asks him and Sihu to stay out of everything that is happening at that moment, because the Azesians are after Sylph and her daughter. We see that the young woman is in a helicopter with Jong, about to land. After getting off the aircraft, the elf asks if she is really in Seoul. The short-haired girl says yes, and that most civilians have been evacuated to the suburbs. The two talk about how the blonde was more worried about the humans than herself until Jaeono and the whole cavalry appear. The man says he is glad to know that the young woman is safe, but receives a very tight hug in response, bringing an end to that chaotic day. It is revealed that, as the days went by, more heroes were sent to Seoul, and while the main cities dealt with the remaining monsters, The members of the IUPC branches in Korea were arrested and placed under investigation. The Hero Association also did not escape responsibility, and Doha and the others had to report everything that happened in a hearing, even though, in the end, they were the saviors. The details about the Azesians were kept secret, but the guilds decided to cooperate with government authorities to find Jerry. We are taken to the National Intelligence Service building, where Sihu and Yu were finally released after 10 hours of interrogation. Outside, the elf's father was waiting for them so they could go to the cemetery. At the gravestone, both talked to Erna. Sad to hear the things the man was saying, the blonde says she is going to the bathroom to cry, as she does every time they visit the place. Even after a decade, Jano shows that he is still unable to let go of his love, or understand why the woman had to leave so soon. At the Epic Guild headquarters, Jihan feels relieved to finally be able to rest. Lying down, he remembers everything that happened, including the part where the researcher said the Azesians would come after him again. We find out that Sihu's mother was killed by Rios, who wanted to have Sylph for himself. Now the story could repeat itself, knowing this. Our boy concludes that he needs to get as strong as Baek and Doha. Suddenly the door bursts open, startling him. Someone enters and says they knew they would find him there. It is Min, who apparently has been looking for the protagonist. Later that same day, Saeem walks through the streets, until the conversation of two boys about a video catches your attention. We see that someone filmed and posted the heroes' meeting. Because of Jihan's presence, people started talking non-stop that he would be a new hero. All of this makes the scrap collector sure that the Epic Guild is destined to rise to even greater fame. He arrives home but ends up finding Yuri talking to the protagonist. The young girl says that seeing the boy on the news helped her make a decision, revealing next that she came here to say she accepts to be part of the guild. Outside, Jang concludes that the two are talking about dating and, excited, says he is very jealous. Smiling, our boy says they can sort out the contract details with Sihu later, while thinking about how the young girl will be a great help in the fight against the Azesians. The position of the scrap collector is revealed by Chilla, who is smaller in size and apparently adores the young man. In the car, the elf learns about the new member and says she is already on her way for them to discuss the terms. Jano asks if the subject was the tamer and says she is quite well known in Japan too, which means that his daughter's guild is becoming quite impressive. Smiling, Sihu says he will work hard to fulfill his mother's dream of building a guild with people of different species. At the guild headquarters, the researcher introduces himself to the ice girl, while judging the calluses on her hands, as they show how skilled she is. Observing, Jihan understands why the man is being so careful, especially now with the story of the Azesians. Chilla continues to hover over Saeem. The researcher is impressed to learn that the little one can grow up to 3 meters. But when trying to take a fur sample for study, he almost gets bitten. Yuri says she will deliver a sample later and explains that her friend is not a big fan of strangers. We see that the young girl is lying, as she knows very well the reasons why Chilla became aggressive. We are taken to the IUPC branch in London, where a very important meeting is taking place. Isaac Becker, the president of the organization, welcomes everyone, and states, when questioned, that he called Rios there to sort things out, as the plan for the Korea branch failed. Far from there, Minsu awakens and exits from a completely intact tank. Jerry appears and says he waited for 3 long days. When asked, she confirms that the plan failed, and that the other version of him is dead. Confused, the scientist asks why they brought him back. The leader of the Azesians enters the room and states that the man can still be useful. The girl runs to hug her boss, but he steps back and she falls to the ground. Lim says he doesn't deserve to be alive, but Rios says it's no surprise they couldn't handle a rank 1 hero, revealing next that he heard Jihan was also present. At the Epic Guild headquarters, Jaehono prepares to leave and says he feels secure knowing that Sihu's squad received another exceptional hero. The elf says he can't leave without seeing Sylph. However, our boy says he has been trying to summon her for days, but nothing happens. The man says the elemental must need a break and that he will find her another day, reminding the Prota of the promise to protect his daughter. In the car, alone, he says that everything has already been set in motion and there is no stopping now. Curious, the elf asks what the researcher and our boy talked about. Disguising, the young man says they didn't talk about anything important, warning next that he will go home now that the guild's business has been resolved. Sihu tells him to wait and asks if he can go to the bank for her. Quickly, the Prota arrives and leaves holding a credit card. We find out that the government issues a VIP corporate card based on the guild's ranking to help with operational costs. He notices that other people are staring at him because of the sword, but concludes that it's better to be safe than sorry, even though the city now seems calm. Suddenly, the boy bumps into a hybrid and wonders what someone like that is doing walking around at noon. Gloomy, Rios says he finally found him, before disappearing completely. An argument between a woman and another hybrid catches Yu's attention. People watch, but also do nothing to help the young man, who looks like a homeless person. The protagonist approaches, determined to intervene. Impatient, the boy transforms and says he will devour the vendor too, since she cares so much about the cucumbers he ate. Screaming, our boy tells people to get out of there. The hybrid asks if he is his next move, but upon hearing no, he says that in that case, he will just kill him. We see that the protagonist's chance of victory is 76%. The creature lunges with its sharp claws and the two meet right in the middle. Due to Jihan's level, subduing a hybrid is no challenge, or at least it shouldn't be. He calls for Sylph, who does not appear, giving the werewolf a chance to stop the sword with his teeth. The enemy tries to break the blade but realizes it is too resilient and ends up being sent back with everything. Our boy feels relieved to see that his sword is still intact, but he still can't use his elemental manipulation, which is a problem, since even with the numbers in his favor, victory is not guaranteed. The hybrid asks if the guy is distracted or something. Snapping out of his thoughts, he asks what the creature is looking for, since it killed someone. Laughing, the werewolf asks why a reason is necessary to kill someone. Yu then says that in that case, it's time for him to die, thus giving up on the plan to wait for the heroes. Both rush back in and exchange blows when they get close enough. The protagonist manages to read all the enemy's attacks, but at one point, he changes direction mid-strike, messing up the statistics. With his arm injured, the boy laments not being able to use his elemental manipulation and, even with no choice, decides to counterattack. Suddenly, Lee Mia appears and catches both by surprise, especially the hybrid, who ends up taking a huge hit. The young girl asks what happened to the protagonist's arm. Frightened, the werewolf starts to apologize, but the girl says it's too late for that, slamming his head against the ground once more. Watching, our boy says it's no wonder they call her the Crimson Killer. After a while, the police and cleanup crew arrive. The protagonist approaches, showing that he has already treated his wounds, and asks what the heroine is doing there. Several people appear and start to whisper. Our boy grabs the girl's wrist and says it's better for them to get out of there. On top of a building, Rios wonders why Yu didn't use elemental manipulation. We are taken to the Dice Guild headquarters, where Beck is curious to know since when businessmen were allowed to participate, referring to the fact that Young Seop is also present. When questioned, the man says he was in an important business meeting, which is why he didn't show up when Seoul was under attack. Everyone notices there is still an empty chair. Explaining, Doha says that the person who will sit there just returned from a mission in Russia. The other heroes are not pleased to know who is arriving and start to complain. Gyubak Kang, from the Destiny Guild, appears and claims he is happy to see that nothing has changed. Silence fills the room as soon as all the seats are occupied, until Junil tells the newcomer to drop the bottle before he forcibly takes it away. The boy asks the man to cut him some slack and says he is only drinking because talking to him sober is unbearable. Moreover, being expelled from his own country leaves a bitter taste in his mouth. It is revealed that the young man is the fifth and final member of the suicide squad that exterminated the Azeans a decade ago, and that when it comes to tracking and assassination targets, no one comes close to him. However, 5 years after the war, the hero was exiled to Russia as punishment for leaking classified information. Minjong asks Gyubak to stop acting like the victim, even after trying to leak what happened 10 years ago. After laughing, the hero says they can't just bury the truth forever. Yoon interrupts the discussion and reminds them that staying silent about the fateful day is part of the agreement. After getting everything off his chest, the newcomer apologizes for not treating them with the respect they deserve. Beck says it's good to see he understands things and welcomes him. Then suggesting that the meeting should begin after all, they need to talk about how they will get rid of Yu and Rios. In the city, the protagonist is still walking holding Lee Mia's hand, in search of a private enough place. When questioned about his attitude, he says he didn't want to drag her along, he was just in a hurry. The girl suggests they go into the karaoke so they won't be recognized. Inside, the receptionist asks them to look at the sign before entering. Embarrassed, our boy says they are not a couple. In the room, the young woman asks if the guy wants to sing something. He says no, and remembers that it's been ages since they sat down and talked. So, he would like to know what she's doing in that neighborhood. Mia says she moved recently in that. She was going to the market when she saw the commotion. They both talk about how things are going and about the new member of the squad. But Mia ends up being too vague, and the protagonist realizes something is wrong. Knowing it's not his business, he decides to clean some dirt from the young woman's hair. Even though the heroine says she's not a child to be treated that way. With flushed cheeks, the girl asks if Yu hates her, since she agreed to his expulsion from the guild. Being honest, the protagonist says he was quite angry at the time, but now understands that the young woman only agreed because she was worried about him. Upon learning how well and stronger the guy is, Lee says she's happy, but it doesn't seem true. At the heroes' meeting, Beck states that, indeed, the only choice is to kill Jihan. Two heroes question if he's listening to himself. He then says that his plan isn't to actually kill the young man, but to set a trap. Since Rios is definitely after the guy, After half an hour of conversation, the protagonist and Mia leave the karaoke. Seeing a store, he asks the young woman to choose something as a token of gratitude. Even though she's all dirty, the heroine says she doesn't need anything, but she ends up giving in to her former guildmate's insistence. In the end, it's Yu who picks out an outfit. Outside, he says that if the jacket doesn't suit her style, they can go to another store. Lee says that actually the outfit is perfect and thanks him. They both say goodbye, as they will be going in opposite directions. Holding the bag, the heroine says she's never felt so happy to receive a gift from someone. We return to the London branch of the IUPC, where Isaac Becker is about to give an interview. The man starts by saying that the recent tragedy in Seoul has left everyone very shaken, but that the action was taken exclusively by the Korea branch, which he considers a breach of trust. Therefore, the IUPC will do whatever it takes to repair the damage in Korea and assist with recovery. A reporter asks how he intends to restore trust in the organization. The president then says that from that moment on, his organization commits to being completely transparent, in addition to thoroughly investigating how the incident occurred so that appropriate measures can be taken. After making the statement, Isaac feels relieved. Shirley Day, an executive at the IUPC, appears and says that the man really knows how to tell a story. The president remembers that he asked her not to attend the conference, but the woman reveals that she knows he is Robert, not the real Becker, and asks what's going on. Explaining, the other executive says that the old man had to leave to meet a guest. We see that the guest is none other than Jaehono, who states that the outbreak in Seoul was not part of the agreement. Isaac says that what happened is nothing but a misunderstanding. Nervous, the researcher recounts that his daughter was put in danger because of this misunderstanding, but the president says that this is a necessary phase for paradise to be built. Moreover, making him the perfect being would bring about some discord. The man asserts that, even so, what happened is unacceptable. Therefore, he expects to be consulted next time, unless the old man wants to end the partnership. Emerging behind the researcher, Becker asks since when he needs his approval to do anything, since he is responsible for providing the means for the experiments to take place. Feeling the pressure, the elf's father questions how many mana crystals the president has ingested, without an answer. Isaac says he couldn't resist, as he needs to know how much his abilities would be enhanced, then asserting that thanks to the research, he is getting closer to realizing his dream. Jaehono says it's better for the man not to rely too much on his research because if he keeps pushing beyond his limits, he'll be dead before seeing paradise. The old man says he took note of the message, but it's better for the researcher not to think about interfering in his plans. We return to Korea, more specifically to the workshop, where Yu decided to take the entire guild to visit Hoyol and perform an upgrade on everyone's weapons, as well as buy a weapon that better suits Yuri's role in the squad. Astonished, the heroine asks how the protagonist managed to find a workshop run by a dwarf, but Sihu says the man is just an ordinary Korean. The young woman becomes confused upon seeing the document, and our boy then says that nonetheless the guy is an incredible blacksmith. Changing the subject, she says when asked that she would like a bow that prioritizes precision and attack power over mobility. The blacksmith asks if the girl wants to be a long-range shooter to provide support, staying further back, and, with her confirmation, he reveals his entire arsenal, which leaves everyone shocked. Yu takes the opportunity to ask if his sword is still intact. Hoyol picks up the weapon to take a look and, after a brief analysis, says that there is something strange with the wind elemental that resides in the blade, which seems to be terrified. This means that something or someone is disturbing Sylph, which is why she is not responding. Our boy asks if there is a way to bring her back, but the dwarf says that, first, he needs to find out what scared her, since without trust between them, the bond will remain broken. The man lets slip something about Erna, but before he could explain how he knows the woman, Sihu calls Jihan to explore the arsenal. In the background, Yuri does not seem very satisfied with the bow. After the shopping, the elf comments on how expensive the weapon was. The Proto asks if, as the guild leader, she shouldn't be more responsible. But the young woman says that he is the last person who should give lessons about money, since he spent an absurd amount on a women's jacket recently. Embarrassed, he asks how she found out about that, while Min seems to be shocked at the possibility of the boy having a girlfriend. Our boy thinks about what to say. However, Saeem approaches and says that they should respect others' privacy. After all, no one needs to know that Yu likes to dress as a woman in his free time. Seeing the scrap collector winking, the Proto tries to stay calm so he doesn't smash him, but he ends up giving in to his instincts. Laughing, a guy with a bottle of soju says that the hero really has no worries at all. Hearing his name, Jihan asks who the stranger is, but ends up getting hit with a bottle in response. Balancing on the Proto's sword, Gubaek says that after all, the young man isn't that strong. The Proto questions who he is again. After taking a sip of his vodka, the hero reveals that he is the current master of the Destiny Guild and the guy who was exiled from Korea. Intrigued, the boy asks why the hell he tried to attack him. Getting off the sword, the drunkard informs that the 6 guilds voted for the young man's protection. But since he disagrees, he decided to check if the protection is truly deserved. Our boy manages to defend himself from the second attack while thinking about how absurd the man's strength is. Praising the boy for the dodge, the hero questions why he isn't using the power of the elemental, then stating that Yu will have to use it if he continues to receive attacks. The Prota strikes, but Gyubaek dodges and says that it is too slow. Showing that it's not quite like that, the young man catches him by surprise, with a ranged attack fired by Minimum. Approaching, the tamer asks if the man is an enemy. Confirming, our boy says that there's no way they can defeat a former rank 1 hero, so he would like her to distract him as much as possible. Seeing that Jihan has positioned herself in the back, the ex-exiled wonders what the guild is plotting. Sihu is the first to act, releasing the bindings, followed by the barrage of 6 magical arrows. Yuri is next and fires the icy arrows. Excited, Kang manages to deflect all the attacks using his weapon, then asking if that was all the duo had to offer. A little further away, the Prota remembers what the dwarf said and concentrates to talk to Sylph. When he opens his eyes, he is back in the other dimension, but no one says anything. Looking to the side, Yu sees his elemental curled up and says he is there to talk. However, the fairy tells him to get out of there, stating that she doesn't want the young man to die. Unable to get closer, the Prota asks what that means. The fairy then asks if he knows what happened to her first contractor. With a sad look, Sylph says that Erna was amazing, but also very naive. That's why she won't let him follow the same path. On the battlefield, the hero asks if the girls are going to just stand there, then asking both to step aside so he can get what he really wants. Yuri calls for Chilla, who promptly appears in her GG version. Stopping the attack, Gyubaek says he heard the story of someone who managed to tame a chinchilla, but they apparently exaggerated the rumors, since all you see is a giant furball, only tormenting other people's pets. He decides to put the big guy to sleep. The heroine rushes to take Chilla in her arms. Frightened, Sihu says the man is very powerful and asks how much longer Yu needs. Trusting the young man, the ice girl steps in front and says she will try to hold the hero a little longer. Thus, the elf should stay further back for protection. Min remembers when she bought the bow, and Hoyol suggested she think a bit more, since the weapon alters the nature of mana, and if used by someone without experience, can drain all their energy. Wielding the object, the heroine shows she is willing to take the risk, even knowing she could die. The leader of Destiny says that switching weapons won't change anything, but the young girl asserts that if she were him, she wouldn't be so sure. Noticing that the arrow is charged with mana, the hero concludes he cannot be hit. The ice girl waits for the right moment and fires. Being too busy being confident, the hero is caught off guard when the arrow changes shape. Looking at the ice stones, the tamer thinks that should be enough to hold the man, but he appears behind her. Kang praises her for the attack, but says that such attacks have no effect on him, since he was banished to Russia and endured freezing temperatures every day. For that reason, he almost feels pity for having to destroy a hero with so much potential. Unless the young girl joins his guild, Sihu orders him to release the heroine, but he decides to do nothing, fearing someone might actually get hurt. The hero looks back and realizes Jihan has disappeared. Our boy appears right in front of him and says he will ensure he never forgets that display of elemental manipulation. When attacked, the ex-exiled realizes the young man is quite confident and, dropping Min to the ground, says he was getting bored, then asking what the Prota is doing while the girls served as a distraction. Our boy takes a look around to see if there are any civilians nearby and finds it strange that the city is empty. He thanks his allies and says he will take care of the rest now, so both should go to a safe place. We return to moments before, when he was trying to understand why Sylph was acting that way. The fairy says she wanted to respect Erna's wishes, who thought that by sacrificing herself, she would save the world. But in the end, she ended up dying, and all that was left was hatred and the threat of another war. That's why she can't go on. Confused, the Prota asks if she wants him to run away, confirming. Sylph says the enemies are not after him, but after her. Thus, he can leave her and return to his friends. With both hands on the barrier, Yu says she is also a precious friend. The fairy says the young man will never be able to break that barrier. But our boy shows that it's not quite like that and, after crossing, states that if he were to give up just because of that, he wouldn't have bothered to come all the way here. Holding the young woman's hand, he tells her she doesn't have to carry the burden alone. Even thinking the young man is a fool, Sylph admits that at the moment, she needs someone like him, promising that this time, she will trust and fight side by side. Jihan launches the wind blade attack. Trying to protect himself, Gyubaek admits that the mana is very dense and, charging into the attack again, asks why the young man decided to show the full extent of his power. Without answering, the protagonist also runs, starting a beautiful exchange of blows. A little further away, Sihu and Min are impressed by the speed and comment on how Yu's power has increased. The hero manages to dodge the attacks and says the Prota really doesn't understand that this type of movement leaves openings for a counterattack. But to his surprise, his strike is blocked by the elemental. Following the plan, our boy sends the man flying, causing a huge explosion. The problem is that Kang appears without a scratch and laughing. The fairy says she won't be able to maintain her physical manifestation for much longer. With that, Jihan asks her to return to the sword, so they can finish the battle once and for all. He strikes without hesitation with the Aura Blade attack, but Bayek arrives and ends the battle using just one hand. We return to the day of the meeting when the Master of the Red Hall explained his plan. Yongseop then says he is against it, as he doesn't believe the young man is worth the effort to mobilize so many resources, since he is nothing more than a mediocre hero, with common skills and no real strength. And there is no proof that Rios is actually alive. Kang says that, for sure, the guy is alive, as he smelled him as soon as he set foot in Korea, but he is also not convinced of the plan. That's why he will meet you face to face to test what he is capable of the old-fashioned way. In the present moment, the leader of Red Hall tells someone who seemed so confident that the hero looks a bit overwhelmed and, when questioned, he states that he only intervened because that attack was too risky even for him. Smiling, the former exile says that the Prota passed the test with flying colors. Irritated, our boy asks why the man had to do that in a residential area. But Bayek tells him to relax and says he teleported the civilians long before the fight started. An army appears, showing that, indeed, preparations were made well before Jihan arrived. Sihu complains about being surrounded, but Yoji approaches and says that no one is there to hurt her. The Prota says he will not cooperate, not that way. However, he ends up discovering that he doesn't have much choice. Everyone disappears thanks to the teleport hero, except for some soldiers who stay to clean the area and Saim, who was forgotten trapped under some rubble. A soldier approaches and says that the boy will come with them. Elsewhere, Rios feels that Yu is on the move and asks if Jerry and Minsu prepared everything as requested. With confirmation, the gang leader says they used all the mana crystals stored in the lab and, as a result, 85 enhanced humans were successfully activated. We see that Psi-013 and Psi-015 have also been restored. The white-haired guy then says it's time to proceed with the Paradise Project. We are taken to the main headquarters of the Red Hall Guild, where the Prota and his allies do not know where they are. Bayek appears out of nowhere and welcomes the trio. Smiling, he says he knows the situation escalated quickly, so he thanks them for their cooperation. Shouting, Sihu says it's not like he gave them any choice. Impatient, the protagonist tells the hero to get straight to the point. Obeying, he says he brought everyone to the building to protect the EPIC Guild from the IUPC and also to test the limits of the boy's elemental manipulation. In addition to luring the enemy there, since he detected the use of magic, which means the trio will serve as bait. Explaining, the boy says what the Prota needs to do is keep his mana flowing while he waits. Jihan asks what happens if he refuses. Activating his power, Gangcheon says that, in that case, he would have to crush his resistance, so it would be better to stop making things harder than they already are and cooperate. Drawing his sword, the protagonist states that if Rios appears, he will take him down. The scene makes the hero realize that the young man is truly starting to embody what it means to be an elementalist, while also resembling Erna quite a bit, and it is for this reason that he will not allow him to come face to face with the enemy. Doha appears and restrains our boy using his ability, leaving the two girls stunned. Beck says that if the man had taken any longer, he and Yu would have ended up fighting. About to launch wind arrows, Sihu orders the hero to free his ally, but his attack doesn't chip a piece off the stone cocoon. The man then says that no one gets free without his consent. Showing that it's not quite like that, our boy says that if anything gets in his way, he will simply cut it. Then asking Sylph to restore his elemental manipulation. The fairy does as requested and gives the command for the boy to act. We see that no matter how solid the barrier is, cracks will always form, and the wind will never miss its chance to pass. Through the gaps, chunks of stone fly everywhere, leaving everyone impressed, including Yoon, who is happy to see how strong the young man is. Jihan says that if the heroes want to stop him, they better come at him with everything they have. Gangcheon finds it amusing, but the elementalist says seriously that he has no intention of fighting, and that it's better for the boy to accept that there's no way to escape the basement of Red Hall, which, in turn, is inside Mumu's stomach. Intrigued, the Prota asks why go so far just to prevent him from meeting Rios. Without explaining, Doha simply says that this fight has always been theirs and that the tragedy from a decade ago as well. Suddenly, the leader of the Red Hall says that the enemy has just arrived. Outside, the white-haired being claims that it's time to hunt the elemental. We are taken to the upper floors of the building, where the soldiers wonder why everything seems so quiet, even after saying that someone is coming. Using his mana stealth, Rios passes by everyone unnoticed, until he reaches a corridor and begins to feel the elemental right beneath his feet. Without hesitation, he uses his power to open a hole in the ground, while thinking about how he is closer than ever to finding the answer he has always sought. Upon landing, the leader of the Azizians comes face to face with two large sealed gates, and concludes that the heroes used a sealing technique with a complex formation. Confident in his own power, he opens a passage and says he expected more, but realizes he has just entered an empty room. Suddenly, several memories flood Rias's mind, memories that did not exist before. It is revealed that as the hidden emotions resurfaced, memories recorded deep in his cells came along. A bit surprised, the white-haired being understands that it was there his death and rebirth occurred, which means those are the memories of his original self. Amid the hybrid's reverie, Mumu appears and throws him elsewhere. Welcoming him, Doha apologizes for dragging the creature there and claims that never, in a million years, did he think he would see that ugly face again. Rias says it's not nice to use the memories of the dead to create a trap. While wondering why his stealth ability stopped working, Beck appears and says that if the enemy wants to know how he was discovered, he can tell. Jun-il, Minjong, Jungsop, and Kang appear out of nowhere to join the party. The leader of the Red Hall breaks the silence and asks what everyone thinks about starting the meeting. Shocked, the master of Karios asks how the hell Rias is still alive. Meanwhile, the leader of the Snowball Guild questions how he looks the same as he did 10 years ago. We find out that Gangcheon kept everyone outside in a separate area so that no one would be detected besides the elemental. Thus, at the perfect moment, he teleported the other heroes simultaneously. Tired of waiting, the leader of the Red Hall decides to make the first move. Nullifying the boy's ability, Rias says that was a nice waste of a move, since spatial magic doesn't work on him, who is also a dimensional mage. The hero says it's hard to forget that, especially since it was the enemy who created the concept of spatial magic on Earth. When asked why he turned against humans, the white-haired being says he actually doesn't know how his past self placed faith in such a miserable species. Using his power, he decides it's time to leave, but his teleport is forcefully interrupted out of nowhere. Smiling, Bayek says letting him escape would be a waste, then activates his dream realm, revealing that Rias was trapped as soon as he set foot in that environment. Jun-il delivers the giant hammer blow and states that this time, they resolved what they started 10 years ago. The leader of the Azizians escapes and wonders again how his presence is being detected, until he remembers he touched the seal of the barrier at the entrance and looks at his own arm. Kang appears and says he took a while to notice his little gift. The two exchange blows and the white-haired guy asks if it was the man who put those marks on his skin. Confirming, he says he made that restriction for a very annoying ability, revealing next that once the mark is placed, the target is constantly exposed to a fraction of their mana. Thus, no matter how much the person tries to hide, their location will always be revealed. Minjong says that now that the hybrid can't hide, he's just a rat running in circles, so it's better for him to stay still if he doesn't want his two legs broken. Doha joins the discussion and says that unlike everyone else, Rias was the only one who hasn't changed. Seeing the stone walls around him, the white-haired being concludes that he needs to get out of there even if he ends up legless. But this time, it seems that there truly is no escape. The leader of the Snowball Guild uses her attack called Absolute Zero to encase all the ice stone, and it's Jun-il's turn to act with his hammer. A mega explosion of light occurs, using dimensional obliteration. Beck puts the cherry on top. Shocked, Park says that all of this is far beyond what a rank 1 hero should be capable of. After the session of attacks ends, the heroes wonder if the target is dead. The teleport guy says he isn't sensing any trace of mana. Rias appears and claims he is disappointed with the extent of Kang's combined power, which falls to the ground and starts screaming, frightening everyone. We see that the mana of the leader of the Azizians has begun to leak through the marks on the boy's arm. Suddenly, chains emerge and bind 2 of the heroes. Surprised, Gangcheon asks how that is possible if he blocked the use of teleportation magic. The white-haired boy approaches the ex-exiled and, holding him by the neck, explains that turning the tables was possible thanks to the mark that was carved into his arm. Thus, he simply escaped the attack through this beautiful path, in addition to opening another space unaffected by the dream realm. Screaming, Doha says that in that case, they need to start over, but ends up having his elemental manipulation blocked. Rias says that they are not the only ones who have gotten stronger in recent years, then breaking the space created by Bayek. Elsewhere, Yuri and Sihu try to find an exit. Our boy asks them both to stop wasting mana and decides to analyze the situation, but his ability says it cannot determine the probability of them breaking the barrier. Sylph appears and explains that this place is a type of pocket dimension shaped by the Earth elemental, which means that, to get out of there, the only option is to persuade him through conversation. The elf agrees and says they should at least try, but the Proto says that won't work, so it's better to breathe and come up with another plan. Determined, the blonde girl starts calling for Mumu, then asking for Min's help, who doesn't seem very supportive. Even so, The young woman decides to help after being reminded of who the guild master is. Yu feels embarrassed for the duo. However, after the tamer says that Mumu is just a glorified worm, the ground starts to tremble. Emerging from the ceiling, the elemental says he is not a worm and asks why the hell the two were screaming so much. The two elementals catch up a bit and Yuri takes the opportunity to ask if Mumu minds letting them out. He says he cannot do that as he made a promise to Doha. Drawing his sword, Jihan says that in that case, he has no choice but to use his aura blade. When asked what is happening, the elemental says he will check. Feeling something strange, Mumu screams and claims that his partner is suffering. Confused, the Prota thinks it is impossible for Doha to be in trouble. We return to the battle site, where the Earth Elementalist is quite injured and cannot believe such a skill exists. Rios appears and says he doesn't need to be stunned, revealing that this is the Judgment Realm, and that each of them is locked in their own space to be used in the Paradise Project. When questioned about what this project would be, the white-haired being says a large-scale airstrike will be launched across Korea, so it's better for him to give up and tell where Yu is if he wants to stay alive. Freeing himself from the arrows, Yoon says it's better for the enemy to worry about his own safety. The leader of the Azesians stops the attack and says the man's elemental manipulation is no longer a threat. We discover that the spatial magic of the Judgment Realm allows the user to take control of the mana flowing in anyone who enters the space, also allowing the breaking of third-party abilities and their use. The Elementalist is shocked to see his elemental manipulation being used by someone else. Approaching, Rios asks what it feels like to be defeated by your own power and, upon hearing that this is impossible, starts talking about 30 years ago, when humanity was almost extinct, until a miracle happened and the heroes emerged. However, according to him, the Azesians had already arrived on Earth, which means that the powers the heroes gained originated from his people. Furthermore, the white-haired guy claims that everything that happened was orchestrated by his original version. Doha asks who the hell he is, since he is not the original Rios, but the enemy decides to end the conversation by summoning the Spear of Judgment. The luck of the Elementalist is that Bayek awakens and grabs the spear with his hand, while saying that the protagonist has arrived. Turning around, he asks if he can join the conversation. The leader of the Azesians wonders how the boy managed to escape, while Yoon asks what happened to the other heroes. His ally says he barely escaped and used almost all of his mana. What it means is that they are not in a good position to face Rios. Therefore, their only idea is to use their supreme magic, called Domain of Eternal Dreams. We go back 30 years, and see little Gangchun running from the chaos with his parents. His mother tells him not to look at the horrors and says that this will not be their end. The family's goal was to reach the heroes, but a little further ahead, a giant monster appears. With nothing to do, the couple decides to push the little one away and thus, both sacrifice themselves so that their child has a chance to live. It was in that desperate moment that the little hero awakened his ability and split the enemy in half, which did not please the other monsters, who began to run to catch him. The next day, the heroes are shocked to see what the little boy did and decide that they will take him with them. However, little Beck does not like the idea and strikes Kang, showing that he is completely out of control. Intrigued, the heroes decide that they have no other choice but to kill the child. But someone approaches and asks if they can try to talk to the little one. It is Erna, who, removing her hood, says she is not there to hurt him. Seeing the woman's ears, the boy tells her to stay away, claiming she is just another monster. He strikes, but Sihu's mother asks everyone not to act, as she can handle it alone. Approaching again, the elf says that he has gained a power that is too heavy for someone his age, while Bayek thinks that if he wants to survive and protect his family, he needs to kill her. Embracing the little boy, Erna says that he does not need to keep fighting, nor looking at that scene if it is too much to bear. And that is how the hero was prevented from drowning in his thirst for revenge. In the present moment, Rios is impressed to see the amount of mana the young man still has, but realizes that something strange is happening, as he is not feeling any mass, as if everything were just an illusion. Irritated, he asks if the hero really thought that cheap trick would work, and if he forgot that he is trapped inside his judgment realm. The spears fly towards Gangcheon. Nervous, Doha says that this seems to be the perfect moment to use that supreme magic. However, his ally tells him to wait and claims he will be ready in a second, after making all the spears disappear. He explains that the illusory dimension does not only refer to the staff, which is just the means for his unique ability, allowing the sealed power to be released. Excited, Beck asks if the imposter knows what it is to dream. Rios tries to concentrate, but his memories begin to interfere again. Seeing the woman with long hair, he wonders why he remembers her if he does not know her. Putting all his power into play, the hero says he will pull the memories from the depths of the enemy's mind and show how his nightmare ended. An explosion occurs, and the leader of the Azesians restores all his spears to go meet the young man. He says that this is useless, as those attacks will never reach him. Confused, the villain wonders what kind of trick that is. Explaining, Gangchun says that if the illusory dimension allows him to control space, the domain of eternal dreams, can distort reality itself. In the blink of an eye, the judgment realm is destroyed. Surprised, Rias tries to understand how the young man is using spatial magic if he had placed a seal. Yoon appears and strikes with the Earth Destroyer. With the impact, the white-haired being concludes that there is nothing more to be done. While the dream hero smiles and says it is time for him to sink into his nightmare, as he falls into the water, the enemy realizes that he cannot move his body. Suddenly, another version of him appears and calls him a copy. Nervous, the white-haired guy says he will not fall for this cheap mental game, but his other version asks if he really believes he is the true one, and what he really knows about Rias. Remembering his past, the enemy tries to come up with an answer, but cannot, because someone forcefully erased his memories, so he cannot remember who he was before everything, nor what he wanted. What truly makes him an imposter? The woman reappears and says that if he had not destroyed his own goodness, she would have been by his side forever. Rias realizes that those words were spoken to his original, and wonders why they affect him so much. Nervous, he says that the remnants of the past no longer matter, only the anger and revenge. That's why, to prove it is the original version, it will bring judgment to humans with its own hands. An explosion occurs and Doha asks what is happening. Beck then says that apparently the white-haired being escaped from its own nightmare, and now, they will have to deal with an even worse monster. Totally transformed, the leader of the Azesians says that there is no dream that lasts forever. We are taken to the IUPC headquarters in London, where Isaac shows that he knows exactly what is happening. Shirley says she hopes this awakening doesn't delay the plans, but Reynard asserts that this won't happen, as Rias has proven to be a very persistent individual. The president then says it's time for them to act, and go to Korea to build the first paradise. Standing by his side, Jeono agrees. Back to the battle, the Earth Elemental asks if there is a mana crystal embedded in the enemy's chest, while Gangchon questions if that would be yet another creation of the IUPC. At the same time, he tries to devise a plan to buy time and regenerate his eternal dream domain. The monster says that if they are going to stand there, it will be the first to act, then showing the full extent of its power. Yoon raises a barrier, but realizes that the released mana is incredibly dense. The dream hero says that the enemy is concentrating all its mana in a single point. After compressing enough, Rias displays the divine spear of judgment. Shocked, the elementalist asks how it is possible for someone to compress an absurd amount of mana into a single object, since this means completely breaking the limits of power. We see that the man is trembling with fear, as this situation reminds him of the past. More specifically, when he could do nothing but watch his companions die. The white-haired being asks if Doha is really going to freeze again. Showing that he won't, he attacks, even with Bayek asking him not to do that. In the middle of the way, something blocks the hero and we discover that the enemy's spear is capable of erasing whatever it touches, thanks to the fusion of the mana crystal with the power of the Azesians. The luck is that this ability does not work against the eternal dream domain. Spitting blood from his mouth, Gangchun asks his friend not to run around like an idiot anymore, while thinking that it might be necessary to use his last resort. Rias wonders what the limits of the hero's ability are, since he saw the elementalist die as soon as he was touched by the spear, and concludes that for sure, the domain has a weakness, which can only be the sphere hovering between the boy's hands. Running, he strikes with the divine spear of annihilation. After being hit, Beck asks at what point he said there was only one sphere, showing that, in fact, there is one inside his eye. An explosion occurs and the divine spear is erased. Rias says that doesn't matter, as he can create another. But he wonders again who the woman covering the hero's eyes is, and why she keeps meddling in his memories. Smiling, Gangchon reveals that she is Erna Hath, the woman whom the enemy's original version loved so much. We return to see Yu, who, drawing his sword, asks Mumu to open the portal, as he needs to enter the fight. Rias stares at the woman and asks how he loved her. The hero then says that his original self admired and respected the elf, but one day betrayed everything and everyone and killed her with his own hands. Memories flood the mind of the white-haired being, who begins to wonder what he was trying to achieve in the past. The leader of the Red Hall takes the opportunity and states that, in the end, he is nothing but a useless plague that needs to disappear. Realizing he is trapped, Rias asks how the boy can still control so much mana, but he says he is not using any mana, as the eternal dream domain feeds on its own dreams. It is revealed that Beck has spent his entire life without sleeping, accumulating dreams full of hope and nightmares steeped in fear. All for the moment he needed to unleash his ultimate ability. The enemy receives the fatal blow directly, and the entire environment is covered by a strong and bright light. After seeing the crystal flying, the hero tells Erna that it is time for him to wake up, since no dream lasts forever. Doha appears and prevents his friend from falling to the ground, then asking him to stop with this tragic hero talk. Smiling, Gangxian says he can't even die in peace. The crystal shatters, and Rias awakens in a laboratory with a scientist saying that nothing else matters. Only the judgment that must be brought upon humans. The Elementalista asks how the enemy is still alive after that blow, but his ally says that the fight was never fair. With several spears pointed at the duo, the white-haired being prepares to deliver his final blow. It is at this moment that Jihan appears and asks if the heroes don't think they are trying too hard. With Sylph by his side, he unleashes the Aura Cutter attack, which destroys all the divine spears. Smiling, Rias says he has waited a long time for that moment. The two stare at each other for a few seconds, and the white-haired being asserts that as soon as he has the wind elemental, he will surpass his original self. When asked, Sylph says that after her contract with Irna ended, her memories from that time were fragmented, but the Rias she knew did not emanate that type of mana. Our boy concludes that he cannot let his guard down for a second, and, using his ability, discovers that the outcome of the battle is uncertain. Yoon asks how the young man got there, and Mumu says he let everyone pass, because he couldn't just stand by watching him in danger. Yuri approaches and says he is there to join the battle. Upon hearing Rias's name, Sihu asks if he is the one who killed his mother. Surprised, Bayek states that they were very naive to think they could hide the truth from her. But still, the elf needs to know that the one there is just a clone created by the IUPC. The enemy creates another divine spear of judgment. A little further away, the Prota feels chills and wonders if the mana crystal is the source of the creature's power. Sylph urges the young man not to let himself be hit by the spear in any way. Yu feels relieved to have an elemental manipulation that works from a distance. But suddenly, Rius appears in front of him and strikes. Dodging, the Prota decides he will use all his strength, then launching the Aura Blade attack. The blow makes the enemy wish he had Sylph even more. Astonished, Doha asks when Yu got so strong. While Gangchun says the blow was strong, but not enough, our boy discovers this when Rias regenerates before his eyes, showing that the fight is not over yet. He then concludes that it will be necessary to destroy the mana crystal. Charging forward, the white-haired being orders the young man to give him his power. Also running, the Prota says that if he wants it, he can just come and get it. Both meet in the center and start exchanging blows, until the Azaciano takes a punch right in the face and discovers that the young man has some tricks up his sleeve. Yu realizes he will be at a disadvantage if the battle drags on. Meanwhile, Sylph tries to gather enough mana to deliver another blow. When this happens, the Wind Blade comes into action, but it ends up being blocked by Rias's hands, who simply absorbs the power and prepares to use it, which leaves our boy in complete shock. He asks Sylph what just happened, but she says she doesn't know either and that somehow the enemy transformed the elemental manipulation into mana. All happy, the white-haired being charges at the young man, asking him to give up the rest of his power. When attacked, Jihan realizes that the creature has become stronger and faster. Ryus manages to put his hand on the sword and starts trying to repeat the trick, but ends up being kicked away. Smiling, he says the young man looks a bit more tired than before. Our boy tells him to shut up, charging at him again. Down below, the heroes watch the flash of light and the girls decide they will give support to the protagonist. But Doha says that if they interfere, they will only get in the way. Not caring, Yuri says that in the Epic Guild, they handle things their own way. Beck states that the young women are not wrong for wanting to help and that they still have something they can do. In the midst of the exchange of blows, the Azaciano says he will dominate the wind elemental before the fight ends. Sylph says she is ready, and once again our boy delivers the Aura Blade attack. However, after a strong flash, Rias shows that he is immortal. The fairy says he keeps draining the mana, which is why the attack doesn't work. The Prota then says he will stop using elemental manipulation, because the more power he uses, the stronger his opponent becomes. The enemy notices that the wind manipulation surrounding the young man has vanished, and decides to take advantage of it to put an end to the fight. Yu activates his ability to test a theory involving not being the only one accessing the data provided. For this, he will share everything with Sylph, as he is connected to her through essence. Rias approaches close enough and strikes, but the protagonist manages to stop him with his hands, as he knew how the attack would be executed. Furious, the white-haired being says he will silence him forever. However, he ends up being hit by the sword and decides to step back to better understand what is happening. Approaching, Jihan asks where he thinks he is going. When hit once more, the enemy says it's as if the young man can predict his movements and asks what the hell changed in just a few seconds to make him fight like that. The protagonist says it's hard to explain, so he will just say he saw a glimpse of the future where he couldn't defeat him. Restoring his limbs, the white-haired being asserts that there is no future where he loses, then activating the Divine Spear ability. Sylph warns her ally to be careful, as the spear destroys everything it touches, except elemental manipulation. Charging forward, the protagonist says that in that case, he just has to avoid being hit by the weapon. Rias delivers several strikes, but the hero manages to dodge them all in advance. When he gets close enough to the enemy, he asks if he doesn't get a prize for what he just did. Nervous, the creature wonders how it is being outmatched by such common attacks. The protagonist prepares to deliver the final blow, but suddenly his processing speed begins to drop, showing that the use of the ability is reaching its limit. The enemy manages to grab the sword with his mouth and states that the fight ends there. However, he ends up being hit by Sihu and Min's attacks. Furious, he starts heading towards the duo, but Bike appears and says that the creature won't lay a finger on the girls, since both are part of the next generation of heroes. Showing that it's not over yet, Doha appears and launches an attack, knowing it wouldn't work. Just to give Jihan the chance to act, Rias realizes he won't be able to absorb the manipulation of the wind and, when hit, starts to crumble, while asking how he lost to a mere human. Putting away the sword, Yu says it was exactly for that reason he was defeated. The space created by the Azizian begins to collapse. Our boy understands that it's truly over. The elf rushes in and hugs him, relieved to see him intact. The young man hugs her back and says he would never leave her alone. Yoon shows happiness at the presence of the trio. The young women say the protagonist needs to treat his wounds, but he says it's not over yet, since they still need to extract information from Rias before total disintegration. The Earth Elementalist approaches and asks what the Paradise Project is and what the IUPC's goal is. In silence, the white-haired being stares at Sihu, who looks very much like her mother, and asks who she is. The blonde introduces herself, which leaves him in shock. She then asks what happened to her mother on that fateful day. The seal that held the enemy's memories breaks and fragments of the past return. We see the day the peace treaty was made, where the Azizian was the representative of the non-human races. Erna, the representative of the humans, arrives, starting the meeting. However, a tragic accident destroyed all hope for peace. Someone approaches and says that, thanks to Rias, he learned something interesting and, seeing that the elf is dead, claims that she made a foolish decision, even though he thought she would understand his plans. The white-haired being asks why the man created a chasm between humans and non-humans. However, the scientist says that even if he told him, he wouldn't understand. Apologizing afterward, in case his patience runs out, the two engage in confrontation until an explosion occurs, scattering debris everywhere. Wounded, the Azizian asks how the man can use the power of his people, and the man says it's because he conducted experiments and extracted mana, revealing, shortly afterward, that conflict has always been part of his plans. To awaken Rias's fury and the raw energy within him, the man reveals that Erna would be the vessel for all this power, but chose to die upon discovering his plan. Therefore, his plan now is to use his daughter. It is at this moment that Giano eliminates Rias, promising that they will meet again. We return to the day of the peace treaty, when Erna was speaking and said she wholeheartedly believed that it is the differences that will guide them to a better future. By her side, the Azizian asserts that it is time to put an end to the war. After a few seconds of silence, a hybrid says that everyone is ready to end the war and accept peace, and, thus, the day ended in celebration and smiles. The scientist arrives and prevents Rias from holding the elf's hand, then congratulating the two. When asked when he arrived, he says he would never miss such an important day, especially because a little girl wouldn't stop being a nuisance. Erna is extremely happy to see little Sihu. The man then suggests they gather for dinner, but the woman says she can't, as she still has commitments. It is at this moment that the white-haired being tells her to go and says he will take care of everything. After all, nothing is more important than family. The trio walks away, and Rias thinks that if he had met the elf earlier, things could be different. Outside, a mysterious hooded figure passes by the family, catching Giano's attention. Worried, the woman says she might need to stay, as she feels a strange sensation. However, upon seeing her daughter's face, she changes her mind and decides to go. Happy, the scientist says that in any case, they will be back soon and, even if something happens, the Azizian is still in the hall. The hooded being enters and, pointing a weapon at a little girl, asks what she thinks about them having a little fun, firing immediately afterward without hesitation. The scene catches everyone's attention and the hybrids start shouting that a human shot a child. Outraged, an Azizian charges at the first guy he sees, while questioning if this was the peace the humans wanted. With chaos erupting, Rias tries to ask everyone to stop fighting. But, upon seeing the little girl, he starts to tremble, feeling a burning rage take over his entire body. The hooded being appears and asks what he is waiting for to protect his people and the elf girl he loves so much. Unable to hold back any longer, the white-haired being unleashes all his hatred. When night falls, Erna returns to the hall, but finds Rias surrounded by bodies, and it was then that the war between Azidia and humanity became inevitable, and in the end, the elf was murdered. Back to the present moment, the creature says that everything was orchestrated by Giano, who still plans to use his daughter to achieve his goal. Supported by Yuri, Sihu asks why her father would do such a thing. Furious, Doha orders the Azizian to stop blaming someone else for his actions. However, Beck tells him to stop shouting since they drew their swords without knowing the truth as well, which makes them quite similar after all. Yu says that Rios is speaking the truth because of his ability. Surprising everyone, the creature asks the boy to destroy its heart, since that is what the scientist wants, so he can also depart and atone for his sins. Our boy looks at everyone in the room and says he will do what he was asked. However, just as he was about to plunge his sword into the target, chains appear and stop him. Sylph says that this is a very powerful spell. More chains appear and bind all the heroes. A rift opens, and a guy with tied hair says it is a pleasure to meet Jihan, but that now it is time for him to leave. Everyone is kidnapped, leaving only Rios, who is in shock upon realizing that the move has already been made. The elf's father appears and takes the item he needs, then stating that he almost made the same mistake as years ago, and that he finds it impressive that the Azizian broke the seal that held his memories. But to his surprise, the creature's heart begins to disappear. Baek appears and says that this was not the real one. Irritated, the scientist says it is pointless for him to resist, especially since the rest of the team is already at the IUPC base. The hero says that in fact, underestimating the best dimensional mage still alive is a big mistake, showing that in fact his allies have already left with the heart some time ago. In the middle of the journey, Yoon warns that he will go back to get Gangcheon. Disagreeing, the Prota tells him to control himself, so the hero's sacrifice is not in vain, especially since they still have a mission to fulfill. In thought, he prays that his prediction is wrong this time. On the battlefield, the scientist says that the hero is indeed very skilled. Therefore, he should know what awaits him, since if he uses more power, death is certain. Showing a vial with liquid mana crystal, he asks the boy to join his group. Bayek says he has no interest in living in a world controlled by someone like Jaeono. The man then asks the young man to think about how things would be if his power could rewrite even the mistakes of the past. Being bold, the hero asks if he really intends to use his own daughter. Confirming, the scientist says that his deceased wife and his daughter possess royalty in their DNA. Therefore, he will only wait for both to understand his reasons. Launching an attack, Gangcheon says that the world he is trying to build is not the future that Erna believed in. Emerging from the smoke, the man says he respects the young man's choice, but he will take his life at that moment. Using dimensional cutting, the hero asserts that he is free to try. Thus, a flurry of blows begins. The young man realizes that Jaeono's power goes far beyond what a rank 3 hero should be capable of and concludes that he will not be able to win, which means there is only one option left. Attacking again, the man says that this is not the best time to get lost in thoughts. With his dimensional barrier destroyed, the hero tries to dodge the next blow, but ends up being hit from behind. The researcher states that the young man wasted his life for nothing. However, he realizes he cannot move his arm. Smiling, Gangcheon asks if he forgot what his powers are. We discover that the supreme ability of spatial magic is called a black hole, as it causes a collapse of space and time. Thus, while the young man consumed his own existence, the hole created pulled everything into the dark void. Determined to sacrifice himself, the hero says that it is within the sphere that they both will be reduced to nothing. After a mega explosion, all that remains is the scientist's glasses. Reynard appears and says he did not expect that, revealing next that he intervened and saved Jaeono just in time. When asked about the heart, he says that the team should retrieve the item at any moment and that there is nothing the man needs to worry about. For this time, even the president himself is participating in the chase. Jihan's group arrives in the city and finds everything completely destroyed. The young women wonder what happened, while Doha says that the situation is even worse than last time, then asking how long the protagonist intends to carry the heart instead of destroying it. The young man then says that, to do that, certain conditions must be met. We return to the past when Bayek entered the sample space and said that only he could hear him, revealing next that he has seen another user with that type of power before. As there is no time, the hero goes straight to the point and says that the enemies are coming along with a high-level spatial sorcerer. The protagonist asks if it is not a good time to destroy everyone at once. However, Gangcheon says that, at this moment, they are at a disadvantage, so the focus should be on protecting Sihu. While he buys time, we see that the hero knows that the worst could happen, but he is willing to do Erna's will. Yu promises that he will complete the mission so that everyone comes out alive. Back in the present moment, he remembers that there is something he needs to do before anything else and, calling for Sihu, he states that he will defeat her father to protect her. For that is the reason he became a wind elementalist, but he needs to know what her decision is. The young woman says that she still cannot believe her father did those things. However, she cannot just stand still, watching the world her mother built collapse. Amid tears, the elf asks for help to stop the tragedy her father started. On his knees, our boy says he will do whatever the guild master commands no matter what happens. Watching the scene, Doha remembers that he always thought it was he and his allies who needed to end the war. But the young people did not step back and took their swords to correct this nightmare, which means that what needs to be passed on to the next generation is not guilt, but rather the baton of opportunity. In the midst of the cute moment, Chilla starts shouting, showing that something is wrong. Yoon asks whoever it is to identify themselves. With hands up, Park shows relief at seeing everyone alive. When questioned, the man says he knows it is strange that he is still alive, and explains that he managed to use the speed artifact, Temporis, to escape Rias's spatial magic. Furious, the hero asks why he fled alone, but the man asserts that it was the best move, since someone needed to warn the others about what was happening. The protagonist approaches and tells the two to stop fighting, as there are more important things to do. Surprised, the man asks if the heart in the boy's hand means that the Azesian has been defeated, then asking the boy to hand over the item so he can deliver it to the government. Pointing a knife, our boy questions how the man knows about the heart, since there's no way someone who fled the battle could know about it. Suddenly, Kim appears and, calling the young man clever, claims he wants to see what he has to offer. An explosion occurs due to the impact of the hero's sword attack, which, upon realizing Jihan has escaped, says that indeed becoming a wind elementalist was not just talk. Our boy looks at his allies to see how they are and notices that Mumu has protected them. Yoon then asks him to focus on the traitors. The leader of Kuroi's asks why the red-haired guy ignored the no-combat orders, and he replies that he only joined because the situation got complicated, also wanting to test his new powers. The Prota asks how the man got the mana crystal. Explaining, Hyuntae says that while they were fighting Rias, the IUPC launched a large-scale attack in Korea, resulting in the hero's defeat and the breaking of the land's protection. When questioned, the ex-hero says he chose to side with the stronger one, since he would never become rank 1, just as the young man once said. But now, with the blessing, his limits have been surpassed. Jihan is attacked and realizes that his former boss is much faster than before. Before attacking again, the man says he might even give the boy a chance, because of old times. But for that, he will need to hand over the heart. Sylph warns that she has gathered enough magical power, which makes the Prota start the compatibility analysis, which is not good at all, since wind cannot defeat fire. Knowing he can't be careless, the young man decides to take advantage of the openings in Kim's fight. After a few more blows, the enemy warns that the fight ends there. However, Yu says that he hasn't changed at all and remains the same impatient as always, showing that the goal has always been to create a path for Doha to attack. With the strike, another explosion occurs. Worried, Park concludes that he needs to get the heart before Isaac arrives. The red-haired guy reappears and claims that the Earth Elementalist is below his expectations, then asking what happens if he kills the only rank 1 hero left. Seeing that his ally was attacked, our boy becomes concerned, but Doha shows that he is fine, despite the damage suffered. Thinking, he wonders if all that power is coming only from the mana crystal. Knowing that a 2-on-1 fight would be foolish, Hyuntae warns that he will call his friends. The other guild members appear, completely transformed. But what catches the Prota off guard is Mia's attack. They stare at each other for a few seconds until Yuri shoots an arrow, forcing the heroine to step away from the boy. Jihan thanks her for the help, since if it weren't for the arrow, he would have killed the girl with his own hands. We see that both she and the others are not fighting of their own will. Discovering this only increases the Prota's anger, who asks why Kim is doing this to his own companions. Laughing, the man says that how he uses the group members is up to the leader. That's why he turned them into loyal puppets, which means the young man will have to kill his former comrades if he wants to survive. Junho charges for the attack, but is stopped by Chilla. Min then says she will handle the situation while our boy takes care of the idiot redhead. To the girl's surprise, a barrier of lightning stops her arrows, and she discovers, upon being hit, that there is a mage in play. Sihu appears and says she will take care of Seun. A burst of light occurs, and we see that the short-haired girl saved her friend from the worst. Watching everything, Park calls Kim an idiot, as he had said the plan was to avoid a fight at all costs. While thinking that maybe he has no other choice but to switch sides again, Doha creates a stone barrier and says they have a lot to discuss. With the artifact in hand, the Kiro's master says the hero is a pain in the ass. In another part of the battlefield, Jihan states that Hyuntae never fought while bickering with someone else, being the reason why he will lose. The man asks if the boy has ever imagined the worst possible scenario and, upon hearing that he hasn't, says he will make sure he sees it with his own eyes. Then starting yet another exchange of blows. Our boy wonders if his opponent has been hiding his true strength all along, until suddenly, Sylph appears and says that now is the time to unleash everything. Obeying, the Prota launches the Aura Blade attack, but this makes the enemy's flames even stronger. In the air, the red-haired guy unleashes the Meteor Break attack, spreading fire everywhere. However, to his surprise, his sword shatters into pieces, showing that he is doing just fine. Yu says that now it's his turn. Thinking, the enemy wonders why someone like the young man would be able to defeat him, when all he wanted was to become a hero. We go back to the past, when Kim was a teenager fighting monsters. Tired, he realizes there are more creatures than he expected, and, to make matters worse, some can use paralytic poison. Suddenly the monsters fly at the boy who awaits his end, until a voice tells him not to lower his head. It's his father, Kim Hyun-sik, master of the Inferno Guild. When asked about the other group members, the red-haired boy says that by now, they must all be dead. Angrily, the man tells him he needs to remember that a hero is someone who draws their sword for others, not for themselves, which means that a hero who abandons their companions does not deserve to be called rank 1. Everyone always followed the guild master, who was a just and strong man. This made Hyuntae want to become a hero just like his father, until one day the man died, after entering a MA alone to help a friend. This incident changed the way the red-haired boy saw things, to the point where he thought his father was an idiot. In anger, he set fire to the memorial and said that Hyun-sik was wrong, then promised that he would never help trash. The following year, the young man joined Keros, until Jihan joined the group and revealed that he couldn't use magic. Furious, Kim asks why Park brought this kind of trash to the guild, and he replies that it's because everyone who can handle mana has already been chosen by other teams. Our boy says he knows he is weak, but still won't be a burden. However, what irritates the red-haired guy the most is the confidence in his eyes. Making things clear, he says that the moment the boy gets in the way, he will kick him out. Another day, in a third-class MA, the group was walking through the environment until Sion decided to scan the place. The orders were for Jihan to stay behind, but suddenly several enemies appear and Kim realizes he is cornered. Snakes grab the hero's leg, who closes his eyes waiting for death. But, to his surprise, the Prota saves him and, turning around, asks if he is okay, just like his father used to do. It was on that day that the red-haired boy realized he could never become a rank 1 hero. We return to the present, where Yu, after finishing his attack, leaves the man with one arm less. Before falling, Hyuntae asks why people like the young man so much. A little way off, Lee Mia is dodging attacks from Sihu and Yuri, who are starting to find it too difficult to subdue someone without causing damage. The tamer fires her blizzard arrow, causing an explosion of ice. However, to her surprise, the heroine was not hit. When everything seemed lost, the young woman appears to regain control, and scared, asks why she is fighting. Shaking all over, Seun feels relieved to finally be free, just like Junho. Seeing that things went wrong, Park uses the artifact, but is stopped by Doha, who says that the power of the object is indeed incredible. Mumu appears and states that defeat is inevitable, so it's better for the man to surrender. On the ground, Kim starts laughing at his situation, and says that in the end, the one who defeated him is someone who is following the same path as his father. Amidst his lamentations, the hero reveals that he was afraid to admit that Jihan has something he doesn't. Our boy then asks if the man remembers the day of his expulsion, then affirming that he lied when he said he could never become a rank 1 hero, because deep down, he knew that the hero was stronger than anyone else, just didn't know how to fight and trust someone at the same time, which ended up diverting him from his own path. Extending his hand, he says it's not too late to start over. The red-haired guy remembers the things his father said and, finally understanding, accepts the help. However, Jerry appears and says that it's very annoying this human tendency to always seek redemption. That's why, from that moment on, she would spice things up. Kim lets go of Yu's hand and asks him to stay alive. The protagonist screams upon seeing the man being massacred. Mockingly, the Azesian says she missed someone as kind as the young man, while he glares at her, completely consumed by hatred. Before disappearing, the hero apologizes for everything he did. Not caring, the girl says she already warned about what happens to those who lose in battle. Furious, the protagonist says that soon it will be her who will lose. His expression makes the enemy even more excited. The young man charges, but Jerry uses his ability to hide his presence. She just didn't know she was fighting someone capable of reading the opponent's movements. Our boy delivers a blow and hits the young woman squarely, showing he is much stronger. Getting straight to the point, he asks what Jano intends to do with Rias's heart. Laughing, the Azesian asks if the young man is talking about the item in her hands. Yu is confused about how she stole the heart, but suddenly, an explosion occurs. Sylph moves her contractor for protection and asks if he knows the guy who just arrived. We see that it is Psi-013. Also appearing is Minsu, stating that enhanced humans can be easily replicated. That's why the young man doesn't need to be confused. Then he reveals that, thanks to the elf's father, it was possible to show Korea 85 masterpieces, which Jihan will have the chance to fight. Even knowing he can handle everyone alone, the protagonist shows concern for Sihu and Min, who are surrounded by the creatures, while the elf laments knowing her father is responsible for all this. The tamer thinks about how it is possible to heal her sister through the mana cores. Suddenly, the enemies advance on the duo, but Junho and Chilla step forward, along with Lee Mia and Siyun. The mage asks why they can't just run, but is reprimanded by her friend, who throws her while ordering her to use her lightning magic. Our boy is happy to see his old allies doing well, unlike Lim, who orders the creatures to kill the young man. Activating his power, the protagonist delivers several blows, showing he is no longer the weakling he once was. Looking at the scientist, he says that soon he will catch him. Suddenly, a portal opens, and Isaac appears, excited to arrive at the first paradise. We see that he didn't come alone. Busy, Yu doesn't even turn to look. The researcher is surprised at how his soldiers are being massacred. Calling him a coward, the protagonist asks the man to step forward. A little further away, Mia is happy to see how strong the young man is, but ends up lowering her guard and giving an opening to an enemy. Fortunately, Min and Sihu take care of things, until Shirley appears and says it's a shame that all of them are so useless. The heroine tells the protagonist's friends to run, but the enemy launches her attack, claiming it's too late to escape. To her surprise, Junho saves the day by creating a barrier. The man says he knows the woman is a first-class ex-heroine from England, but they can also count on a mage who doesn't lose in terms of pure destructive power. Preparing, Siyun says she will use the strongest spell she has, then delivering a fatal blow. Not caring, the enemy also launches an attack and says she wants to see if the mage can block her power. The redhead realizes her magic is being absorbed and, when an explosion occurs, the tanker screams. But Doha shows he saved the girl and doesn't like noisy people at all. Shirley says she is surprised to see the hero alive and asks if he is there to die with his friends. Telling the woman to shut up, the elementalist says he can't wait to see what a British heroine has to offer. However, the young woman says that fighting him would cause too much confusion, so she will leave this mission to Robert and Caden. Showing she is not afraid, Yoon smiles and tells the enemies to attack him. After dealing with the creatures, our boy charges at Minsu, but ends up being stopped by Isaac, who is only interested in knowing where the heart is. The protagonist asks who he is, and the old man introduces himself without hesitation. Worried, Sylph tells the young man to be careful. The warning makes him dodge the blow just in time, leaving the president quite impressed. Thinking, our boy concludes that the man simply crushed space with high-density mana and asks himself how many mana crystals he has absorbed. The fairy says she also can't see any data, which makes the situation even more dangerous. Lim appears and, on his knees, says it's an honor to meet Isaac. He then states that the heart is in Jerry's possession and that now they just need to eliminate the interferences. When called, the Azesian appears and hands over the item. In the air, Jihan says it won't be that easy, but the enemy, besides dodging the attack, also appears behind him, calling him arrogant. Then he begins to absorb the power of the heart. Everyone stops to look, impressed by the scene, including the executives. They seem excited to witness the awakening of the transcendent. No longer needing glasses, the ruler of paradise displays his new form and, smiling, says that the feeling of being a perfect being is even better than he imagined. Jihan rushes in, about to deliver an attack, but he ends up being hit and sent back to the ground. Sylph tries to talk to the young man while he feels his consciousness fading. Suddenly, Erna appears and says his role is not over yet. All-powerful, Isaac begins to laugh uncontrollably. However, to his surprise, his body starts to grow and deform. Giano steps out of the portal and says that the power of an Azesian is not something that can simply be absorbed and controlled. A suitable vessel is necessary to contain it. Frightened, the president calls the researcher his friend and says he needs to explain how he can return to normal. Placing his hand on the heart, the elf's father states he will do what was asked and that it's time for the man to return to dust. Shouting, the enemy says he thought they were friends, while recalling the first time he met Giano. Laughing, the researcher says he never considered him a friend, and when Isaac completely disappears, he turns around, looking for Sihu, who will serve as the vessel. Jihan asks if he would be content to adopt a child. Then he strikes with his sword while stating that the man will have to deal with him first. The scientist manages to defend himself and counterattack, and after a few blows he says it's impressive how the young man doesn't hesitate to move, as if he had all the answers from the beginning, which means the young man has some ability he is unaware of. Our boy kicks the man away and asks what his goal is with all of this. Approaching again, Giano says his goal is evolution, because after everything that happened 30 years ago, there is no guarantee that such irrational events won't continue happening, and to face them, it's necessary to transcend limits. Irritated, the Prota tells him to stop speaking pretty words and just say what his true objective is. Laughing, the researcher says he will share his plan only with the young man. Thus, he reveals that when it all began, all he could see were burning bodies. But then, a being far beyond human, with with extraordinary beauty, appeared, leaving him enchanted. However, since that day, he has never found that creature again and now needs to discover the limits of humanity, along with the path to reach them, because his goal is to recreate that being with his own hands. Seeing that the young man looks confused, the man reveals that, besides the monsters, magical books from other worlds also came through the portals, and, after several experiments, he realized that the portal leads to that mysterious being. But for that, it's necessary for two opposing forces to achieve balance within a body. Yu states he has no desire to meet that being. Appealing. The researcher says the young man must have felt the fleeting helplessness that comes from living as a human. Thus, he would like to offer a chance to lead paradise as a transcendent by his side and alongside his daughter. Sihu appears and attacks her father. Then she states that the man is trash. Smiling, the researcher says she is a very disappointing child. Our boy asks if the elf is okay. She replies that she is, as she understands that this person is not her father, but rather a monster. The man says he doesn't want to hurt her, so all she needs to do is accept becoming the vessel. Furious, the young woman launches an attack using 6 magical arrows, which are stopped by the enemy. The Prota arrives from the side but is also halted, while receiving thanks for having protected the blonde girl during this time. Hearing that his role is over, Jihan says it's not quite like that, since he made a promise to Sihu to change the irrational world that the researcher created. The man realizes that the young man has been gathering mana all this time. Without hesitation, the Prota delivers the Aura Blade strike, causing an explosion of light. When everything returns to normal, only a crater remains on the ground. Landing, our boy conducts an analysis and discovers there is no chance of survival. Approaching, the elf asks if it's over. He says yes, and that the researcher probably died. Suddenly, a voice says she wanted to become someone's necessary existence, but nothing remains, which makes them one. Meanwhile, the Prota tries to talk to Sylph, but the elemental remains silent. He decides to join the others, but when he looks to the side, he realizes something is wrong with Sihu. Someone appears and says the boy doesn't need to be so surprised. After all, the girl's purpose was always to awaken as a coding. Reynolds steps out of a portal from nowhere and, noticing the confusion in Yu's eyes, says he was waiting beyond the dimensions for the moment he would let his guard down. The mage reveals he knows about the ability and states that, for now, the young man will have to come with him. To the space of multiple dimensions, with the Prota out of the way, Jaeno resurfaces behind his daughter and, without hesitation, places Rias's heart in her, stating he is very proud of her. The elf's eye lights up, and smiling, the mysterious being says she is happy they have become one. Jihan wonders where he is, until the mage appears and says he prepared that place for him. Apologizing afterward for the somewhat disordered summoning, the Prota strikes and orders the man to send him back. Holding the sword, Reynolds says the young man can no longer prevent the transcendence from happening. So, it's better to calm down and listen to him. After all, he also carries Erna's will. Out of nowhere, Bayek appears and asks the Prota to lower the sword, as no one there is an enemy. Our boy uses his ability to confirm if he is really in front of the hero, who says he is hurt for not being recognized right away. The samurai mage explains that the man was there all along, and that's why the young man couldn't detect him. Helping with the explanation, Gangchun states that, indeed, he should have died after using the black hole. But suddenly, the mage appeared and prevented him from leaving. Confused, the Prota asks who the samurai really is. Ready to tell his story, the mage says that for the last 30 years, he has been the successor of Erna's testament, and that his goal is basically to thwart Jaeno's plan. But for that, it was necessary to invoke the transcendent. In the real world, the researcher is happy to see that his plan worked. The mysterious being says that of all the bodies it acquired, this is by far the second most perfect. Asking next if it was the man who helped her. Shouting, the elf's father says yes, and that he needs to know why he was chosen that fateful day. If it was because he is special, different from other humans. Breaking the mood, the creature questions who the man is, stating next that mortals are so fragile that they always attribute meaning to any brief encounter with great power. After hearing he was just another one, the researcher laments all his sacrifices. The mysterious being hugs him and says that now he doesn't need to worry anymore, as he will indeed become someone special, but as part of her, which will make him unforgettable. In another dimension, Reynolds continues the explanation and says that Erna planned everything 30 years ago. We discover that the Transcendent's name is Eater, and that he is responsible for bringing the planet Azizia to ruin. In addition to having opened the gates years ago, all to absorb the ability that Jihan possesses. Jaeno simply disintegrates and the new enemy shows herself ready to go after our boy. To make one more meal, however, to her surprise, the boy is nowhere to be found, which means there are still people willing to hinder her by following Erna's plans. Determined, the creature says that in that case, she will have to make the young man appear. She fires an attack into the sky, causing a portal to open, from where creatures appear looking down. The scene frightens both the remaining heroes and villains. Minsu asks what the hell that giant monster is, and Jerry says the creature was not born on Earth, revealing next that her name is Arconovella, known as the calamity that descended from the skies during the fall of Azizia, which makes her feel more alive than ever. The creature targets Yuri, who, by a hair's breadth, is saved by Doha. The hero tells her to stay alert while he tries to organize his thoughts to understand what he is dealing with. In the air, Iter is surprised to see more people, and, when called Sihu, states that the young woman no longer exists, asking next where Yu is. Shirley strikes at the creature and asks where the president is. When the enemy appears behind the girl, the two boys charge into attack, but they end up being stopped by the strands of hair from the otherworldly being, who, licking its lips, says it was indeed hungry, before absorbing the mana crystals that Robert and Caden possessed. Shaking all over, the blonde girl asks if this is really what Isaac wanted. Yoon appears from the side and ends up being captured by one of the giant monsters. Seeing that he will take a hit, the elementalist wonders if this is his end. However, Jihan finally appears and, freeing his ally, says that Iter's opponent has just arrived. Looking at Doha on the ground, he asks if he is so weak that he can't even stand up alone. Accepting the help to get up, the man says waiting for the boy almost drove him mad. Approaching, the enemy says she didn't expect him to show up just to save a few mortals. But since the young man is here, it's time to hand over his eyes. Our boy explains to his ally what they are dealing with and asserts that he didn't bring only bad news, for during his absence, things happened. Impatient, the creature orders its servants to grab the boy and he asks how long Bayek will remain standing by watching. In the air, the hero says he doesn't like to be rushed, then activating his power and hitting the giant squarely. Yoon screams for his friend to move, for the enemies are about to counterattack. The hero manages to defend himself and, smiling, says it's time for Reynold to act. Emerging from a portal, the mage says the boy is better at using people than he imagined. The creatures are swallowed by the samurai's dimensional magic, which leaves Iter surprised. Our boy decides to attack using his aura blade. However, to his misfortune, the enemy breaks his sword with one hand while claiming she has never lost a fight and that he doesn't understand the true power he carries in his eyes, a power that has been his from the beginning. Jihan says he won't let her take anything from him, initiating the attack called Life Drain, which takes him into the creature's inner world. We go back to the past when the mage explained that the only way to defeat Iter was by using the sampling ability. Thus, before the enemy fully regains her power, the boy must extract Sihu. Inside the other dimension, our boy manages to find his unconscious friend. Screaming, he says he will get her out of that place. However, suddenly, sharp structures pierce his body, causing his vision to start darkening. A voice emerges and orders the boy to pull himself together. It was Erna's voice, who, smiling, says she was waiting